Star Trek 57, M23, take 2.
It's got Star Trek, Episode 9, the Picard pilot, Remembrance.
Would you like to finish it, Captain? I don't know how. That is not true, sir. Oh, it's all right, number one. I came here to find safety. But one is never safe from the past.
Please, sir. Someone's after me.
I have an appointment.
Your name, please, sir?
Picard, P-I-C-A-R-D.
It's nice to see you up and around again.
We have an obligation to investigate.
There is no we, Jean-Luc.
Admiral, I am standing up for the Federation, for what it should still represent.
This is no longer your house, Jean-Luc. Go home.
I have to help her.
You really want to go back out into the cold?
More than ever. I have a plan.
Another top secret, unauthorized rescue mission.
This is everything that ever mattered to me. I'm going with you.
I need your skill and your courage. The past is written. But we are left to write the future.
Hold on.
She was sent for a reason.
I'll get the information we need.
I help people who have no one else to help them.
Dad!
What?
Come out here!
Stop yelling!
It's Jean-Luc Picard!
Hello, Will.
Jean-Luc.
We all have a story, just waiting to be claimed. Thank you for not trying to talk me out of all this.
Believe me, I know better.
Tires don't pop on motorcycles too often. That'd be fucked up if it did.
Yeah.
Because a tire...
Because if Mike rode a motorcycle, he'd be popping tires all over the place.
Yeah, he would. It'd suck.
He'd not wearing a helmet.
Like,
He'd be dead.
when I was driving, a tire popped while I was like going like 55 and it sucked. I can only imagine what it would be like on a unicycle.
Should we talk about Star Trek?
Star Trek is a show that we watch, and we watch it, yeah, and it's Star Trek. It's so cool. Oh, I like Star Trek and Picard and Data.
What did we watch last week? This is a test.
I watched some Deep Space Nine last week.
Deep Space Nine.
Well, last week, the last episode, we talked about
last week.
the animated.
That was we're supposed to
the animated
last week quote
series.
Yeah. TAS.
Last week.
Star Trek TAS.
Which was entertaining. And then what are we talking about this week?
That was last week. We talked about that.
And what are we talking about this week?
We talked about that 1 week ago.
What are we talking about this week?
1 week later, we're talking about Picard.
Yeah, it just so happens.
Star Trek Picard.
Star Trek Picard is where it's at this week. It's pretty rad.
So, anyway, I figure we just get right into it because this episode was...
it gets right into it.
I guess the episode gets right into it. I guess first I should say, this is somewhat weird because all the podcasts we've done before, at least one of us in the room has had some post pilot episode context because we've either seen some or most of the show and we know stuff that goes on afterwards. So this is the first time where we're like, we don't know what's gonna happen next.
Right.
Yeah, it's super exciting.
It's given us a bunch of questions.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool, but. There will be spoilers, which should be obvious, but I don't know. I don't know how people. We've got like I checked on the computer, and it says we have like 3 million listeners per week. I'm pretty sure I read that
Anybody
right.
who's listening to this podcast has probably already seen.
Well, one would presume.
Yeah.
One would presume, but you never know.
You
but
never
just in
know.
case.
It could be some people
I
that.
thought it was only
Spoilers.
like 1 million, but it's actually 3.
Yeah, it's 3 million.
That's crazy.
It's 3
That's
million.
kind of funny.
I underestimated.
3 million listeners.
I underestimated.
Most of them from Canada for some reason. I don't know.
That's fine with me.
Yeah.
Canada's cool.
Canada's all right with
It
me.
is.
They seem like a nice place.
With the Canadian bacon
They have a reasonable government.
on occasion. Sometimes.
On occasion,
Yeah.
they
kinda
legalize
ebbs and
cannabis.
flows.
They have some road in Quebec that it's like the road they take that when it's like their highway road. I can't remember what it's called, but it doesn't have a shoulder and it's a
King's
high.
Highway?
Excuse me, sir. Can you point me to the highway road?
It's a literal.
You know the one?
It's a literal, highway that it goes high above, not that high above, but it goes above, and there's no shoulder, so it's like a bridge road or something. So during
Is this so that like bears and stuff can wander about underneath it?
they're waiting for that big flood to happen.
Because it's not a bridge, right? You're saying it's
It's just a highway
it's
an
like
road.
elevated road.
I believe this is what I recall. But one thing I can tell you for certain is that
For certain.
it doesn't have a shoulder in at least solid several parts of it, or at least all of it. I don't remember, but
How are you supposed to stop on that road?
that's the problem.
Nobody stops in Canada.
Nobody stops.
You
So
keep driving.
So if your car breaks down,
There's nowhere to stop.
you fucked up traffic for everybody that morning at work, and everyone's stuck forever, and they hate themselves, and you too, Jesse Knight.
So that's an excellent.
I've never been to Canada.
That's an excellent anecdote about Canada.
Yeah, so now you know this about
Quebec.
Quebec specifically.
Oh,
It's
Quebec.
it's tangential.
It's
It's,
lower.
tangentially related because some Star Trek shows are filmed in Canada.
Oh, yeah?
Although not
That's right.
necessarily
Really?
the one we're talking about.
No, some
At
other
the
ones.
moment.
Some other
I didn't know
ones.
that. So I guess also there'll be by proxy there'll probably be spoilers. There may or may not be spoilers for other Star Trek shows. but we
Discovery
don't
and
know.
I think it's all
Enterprise, I
spoilers all the time.
all spoilers all day.
Yes.
Half the price.
Yes.
If these are
Full
spoilers,
price.
then you're behind the game.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. What was I mean? Dive right in. What were your thoughts about how this started? I mean, you're sitting there, you're all excited. Picard's about to come on. It's like super awesome new Star Trek.
Data was kind of fat.
Well, yeah, that's what are you going to do? But I actually thought they did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
I was impressed with how Data was portrayed and whatever tricks they did with the makeup and the CGI and stuff.
I thought the cold opening was the normal opening or whatever, because that it began with some space and some tune. Oh, I wish I had gotten the name of that tune, because it's like
Blue Skies.
Oh yeah, it's what they said.
Right.
The
It's
song,
like,
right. It's right there. In the
that's
song.
from
is that a
from
Bing? Is that Bing Crosby?
I think it's Bing Crosby,
Okay,
and
yeah.
who is the like uncle of Denise Crosby? I think he's her uncle.
Oh,
Denise Crosby, who played Yar.
no kidding.
That's right.
Far out.
Yeah, so that's the main connection. But the other connection is from, and we'll get to Nemesis later.
So
Reluctantly,
yeah,
but-
we have to. I mean,
Unfortunately, but
yeah. So I thought
Data sings that in Nemesis. It's a
Oh.
callback to Nemesis, and the whole deal is at the end of Nemesis when Data downloads his brain or tries to into B4. The little line of hope at the end is that B4 starts humming Blue Skies.
Right, yeah.
So you're like, oh, maybe there's some of Data in before.
And then they just got B4 in a drawer somewhere.
Yeah, because I guess
so-
it didn't work out.
So I was like, that's an interesting choice because I knew it was a song and I just forgot what it was. But I was like, that's an interesting choice for a opening, and that wasn't the opening at all. Turns out.
Yeah,
As it
they had
turns out.
actual theme music.
Yeah. Anyway, so no, but I like that opening with Data and Picard.
And the dreams.
Dreams playing cards, and like I don't know how long did it take you to figure out that it was a dream?
I don't know. I kind of got that vibe right from the beginning, just because it seemed dreamy. Why would Picard be? He looked like old Picard in civilian clothes. He's on the Enterprise D. I know.
Right.
Data's
Yeah.
wearing a Nemesis style uniform.
And I asked that because I felt pretty silly because they're playing cards and stuff, and then he goes and lays down the 5 queens, and my thought was like, they play cards weird in the future.
Yeah.
And like and it didn't dawn on me at that point.
They
And then
changed the rules on us.
and then after they start showing Mars, I'm like, wait a minute, I bet this is a dream. And it turned out, well, I guess I'm stupid. I should have picked up on that earlier, but I didn't. But that's okay.
It had a dreamy feel to it.
yeah, that
Yeah.
too. So Jesse's saying,
But it was-
he's accentuating the fact
Yeah.
that you should have figured this
I
out.
should have done it.
I'm not saying I'm like the most perceptive guy ever. or anything.
Well, it's
He's just
okay.
saying he's more perceptive than you.
It's okay. I'm okay with
I
it.
miss a lot of stuff.
I stare at things and don't see them, and I was always bad at inventory at work as a result. So, yeah, it's okay. We all have our strengths, and I'm okay with that. I'm cool with that.
I'm cool with that
I can
too.
accept that. I can move on, and I can be chill. So yeah.
And in this case, we had, the cold open. It's a tradition in Star Trek. We commented, in the previous episode about how it was sort of odd that the animated series didn't have one. Mm-hmm. Encounter at Farpoint didn't have one. But what I did think was interesting is this cold open had sort of 3 scenes in it, basically, because it had the dream scene, and then it had Picard waking up, and then it had our introduction to Daj in her apartment. That all happened before the opening credits.
That's right. You're right.
So they kind of like packed a lot in there. And one thing is, later in the episode, I think we should like go over any Easter eggs, or at least ones we hadn't discussed yet. But I thought one that I would point out, since we did recently.
His dog's name number 1.
Well,
yeah,
there's
right.
There's a bunch, but the one that's relevant to the specifically to the opening sequence, or not the opening, the cold open, is that just like Encounter at Farpoint, this pilot opened with zooming in on a window of the Enterprise and seeing a silhouette of Captain Picard.
Interesting, yeah.
In Encounter at Farpoint, it was totally off-putting and weird. In this one, a little less so, but it still put you into that kind of mind frame, mind bound.
That's cool, yeah.
What species, or I guess that's what you're supposed to call it, was her boyfriend?
Zahian, which is a Easter egg for Discovery, because that was Queen Poe in season 2. With the eyeballs.
Eyeball.
Yeah. So I think Jesse hasn't completed season 2 of Discovery yet, but Dan's seen it. Mm-hmm. And Queen Poe becomes important later.
So it goes on to his Chateau Saint Picard or whatever. And who are those? Who are those people?
Who are those Romulans?
It turns out they're Romulans, but like
no. Well, actually, I was referring to the people on his. There's that Joban and that another person. Like I guess Joban they're just general caretakers or something.
There's some Romulans.
His brother's probably dead, right? Like his
brother's dead.
older,
yeah. No, his brother died in Generations. Or it was
Is that when he was crying?
Yeah.
About some little
because his brother and his nephew died in a fire. There was a fire. There was a fire.
Yeah.
I mean, it was dramatic, but it was,
But like, it took me a while because the Romulan, actually every Romulan I see in this show, they don't really look like Romulans.
Romulans.
They got the ears, but they have like regular human hair.
Yes.
And they're not wearing like goofy clothes, and they're not acting all stiff.
Well, so another thing that I think is going to be...
They don't have weird Romulan hair.
Wait, did you say Joban is Romulan?
Yeah, they're both Romulan.
They were both
Those
Romulan.
people that, take care of them.
Okay.
We will also, later in the episode, I've got a list, and you guys can add to the list, but, before Picard started, tons of people were talking about what episodes do we need to watch in order to have an idea. And I think there were a lot of great suggestions, which we'll go over later as well, but... now that we've actually seen the episode, I think it sort of expands that list a little. And one that I want to put on there is the Enterprise incident, the original series episode where it has this super hot Romulan captain. I think she's a captain. And there's this whole thing with her and Kirk and their cat and mouse and stuff. But the main point of it being that the Romulans, the style of Romulan from that episode, from kind of the TOS style Romulan, seems to be what they're mimicking here in Picard, with the more like crazy eyebrows, the hair that looks like more normal and like nice. The Jovan guy had sort of slight bumps, so I think they're kind of going for like the TNG is not wrong. It's just sort of like some of them got the bumps, some of them don't.
So were the Romulans as closely related to Vulcans in the original series as they became later on?
I think
they were always like that.
That was the gag in Balance of Terror, which is another one worth watching for background on Romulan Federation.
Is that
history.
Is that the first one with the Romulans?
That's the first one. That's the first one because
with Mark Leonard.
Yeah, Mark Leonard plays a Romulan commander. It's basically a submarine show, very well done one where like
did they go too deep and then had too much pressure around it and they had to they didn't know if their ship was going to handle it? Did they have one of those scenes?
No, because it's in space.
Well, but something equivalent. They had that in like Das Boot.
Das Boot,
yeah.
And they also had it in that other Hunt for Red October? I don't know. They had in every submarine movie. There's always a part where they go too deep and they can't.
It's like we can't go that deep.
Yeah, we've never gone that. Yeah, exactly. And they
There's
do.
that
I don't
one
think
with,
they have that in
Matthew
Balance of Terror.
McConaughey submarine movie. There was that one. What's that one called?
Who
cares?
All right.
Was
all
it
right,
a?
all right.
It's called All Right. All Right.
Interstellar?
We've gone too deep.
No, the submarine one. It's like a World
Oh
War
no,
II
it's going to
movie.
implode.
Oh no, I can't even.
Watch out.
So,
the balls are crushing in on us.
So we're talking about submarine episode in space.
Now, Balance of Terror is where they first discover that the Romulans look like the Vulcans, and then they derive from that. Of course, later on, the history is presented as being much more well understood, certainly by the Next Generation, where it's just well understood that Romulans were like an offshoot. They left Vulcan, I think, however many thousands of years before. The Vulcans, until that, Balance of Terror, did not know what happened to them, but it turned out they turned into this strong empire of like kick-ass, like pointy-eyebrowed people.
Oh, I feel so silly now because in retrospect, like it didn't occur. I was like, oh, there's some kind of something race, and it just didn't. It's not that I didn't know they weren't Romulans or that they were Romulans at his Picard chateau. It's just I never bothered to try to make a connection.
I couldn't figure out at first. I looked it up.
But in retrospect, it totally like makes sense that they're Romulans based upon Picard's whole
because they're
context clues.
The context.
They're
Right.
refugees.
Yeah,
They're all like, you helped us out.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't let that mean lady be so mean to you.
Well, there was a lot of like context style cue things. Like what did he say? Like
one way to look at it is I think that the writing in this series is very mature in the sense that they do, as we've discussed, it's been an issue in some of the other pilots that we discussed and TV series, and that they don't do the exposition very well, or they do too much of it, or inelegantly. I thought that this episode, by and large, did a really good job of that, and some of that is by saying...
this dude writes books, right?
Yeah, Michael Chabon.
Michael
yeah,
Chabon.
although, a bunch of people worked on this particular, I think Alex Kurtzman and others worked on the teleplay.
Yeah, so and going to what you were saying just now, when I was talking about sort of clues of what was going on, him talking about how he's regretting to have ever agreed to do this thing, and you're like, well, what is he agreeing to do?
Yeah.
I don't know. And then they give you another clue after that when with Joe Bond dude, and he's like, so are we ready or whatever? And he's like, oh, you gonna interview me as well? And it's just kind of like very kind of like, okay, I get what they're doing here. They're getting at something coming up. So
yes,
and so I guess that's
he doesn't like wearing that suit.
And that whole lead up and the interview was kind of like it's a pretty good way.
That's what it is. It's,
Yeah,
it's conveying the information that creates the world, gives you the facts you need to in order to move on with the plot.
And it's pretty obvious. It's pretty obvious that that's what's happening. But I thought it was.
Yeah.
I thought it was. It was pretty done pretty well. It didn't like.
It was well incorporated in the
Yeah.
plot, and I think that the idea of the interview, and I've heard some people suggest that it was, in their opinion, done inelegantly, but I actually think it was done. It was quite a clever device because it can demonstrate, Picard. Not only does Picard himself, along with the help of the interviewer, get to convey what happened with the Romulan star, which they got the wrong star, but that's beside the point. Romulan disaster, and then the synths attacking Mars, and all that information got out in like the span of 20 seconds, right?
And then the dream makes sense because you're like, okay, that's what that dream's
Yes.
about. Like,
Well, what I mean. In terms of inelegance, I don't know. It's like I just mentioned. It's obvious that it's happening. It's obvious that okay, this is them explaining the plot. But it wasn't done in a way that's boring because too much exposition that's straightforward is just boring. It's just waiting until you get back to the movie or story essentially.
And that's what we complained about with. Although we really liked the Discovery pilot, what we didn't have here is Picard. It wasn't like Picard talking to Jabon saying like, Jabon, I'm very sad today. Why? Because I'm remembering that these events,
yeah, exactly.
Blah blah. And he didn't like, it was in the story, and it gave Patrick Stewart a wonderful opportunity to sort of kind of re-inhabit the role of Picard.
Yeah, be the captain we remember you to be or whatever.
Because it's like he so often was on the bridge, he had to play a role. Like there's the captain, with his crew and stuff, but then there's the captain talking to the Klingon or the Cardassian on the view screen, you know, or where he's acting, you know, he's taking on a role. And in this case, during the interview, put him in the same position where he is advocating for a position and then finds himself having to defend things that he was not expected to defend.
Yeah. That was pretty predictable, right? Like when they said, we made sure they won't ask you. That was another bit of like, oh, there was something going wrong with the Starfleet, because they presented that by saying, now you promised they made them promise they're not going to bring that up. You know, it's like, okay, I wonder what's going to happen. The interviewer, the questions. Now, this is one of those things where there was the links that she was drawing in her line of questioning. You could explain it in several ways. One way you could just say it was like kind of like clumsily done. Another way you could say it is that maybe she was just grasping at straws. Another way, it was just like she was very obviously leading the conversation in a direction, which she was. But it's like, so there were some examples are like when she was asking how he felt, and he was like, you know, there's no words to describe the calamitous scale of the change, which is one of, you know, he's like saying there's no words to describe it. And she's like, oh, you can't tell us how it feels. But it's like, well, no, he just did. He's just saying it's so intense that he can't explain it. So, but she's like, oh, so you can't put into how you feel, but your initial actions were to call for a massive relocation. It's like, you know,
it's Fox News style interview.
Right. It's like, you know,
it's gotcha interview.
In that time, there's going to be people that are like, yeah, Picard, that guy was fucked up. And there's going to be all these other people that are be like, yes, Picard is our hero. Or like, at least he's a respected, you know, Starfleet dude that we keep hearing about all these stories.
Yeah.
And these other people are like, oh, Picard, he really fucked up. He fucked up that one time.
Yeah, right.
Let's get him.
Yeah, right. And what is his answer supposed to be? Like, oh, gee, I don't know. I never thought about it. You know, like you can't tell us how you feel. You had no emotions, but you had a lot of feelings. It's like, no, I never thought. It's like, yes, he just said he had a lot of thoughts about that. So, I mean, that was one. And there was another one later in the interview that she was basically...
It was designed to be... And you could see her smile when he got up and left, when he got angry. She liked that. She was like, that's what I wanted. It's almost like she didn't even care about the content. She wanted the drama.
Right.
Because they definitely... I mean, it's overt that they set that up to be like a Fox News style interview. But interestingly, it's called the FNN, the Federation News Network. That's not the first... They also had those reporters on... in Generations on the Enterprise B when that launched, because that was that whole thing. They were like touring the first day and like everything's like, oh, we don't have a crew, we don't have weapons, you know, that whole gag, that old gag about not having enough photon torpedoes.
Oh yeah, I do remember that.
You don't see a lot of the civilian world in Star Trek in a civilian context. You see civilians as guests in a military context. Yes. And so now there's this you know, there's a media, you get the sense of their sort of media presence, what's happening, like their news. You see people in cities just being
you
people,
see Boston and stuff, people hanging out.
There's a bunch of stuff on Okinawa. I don't know.
In San Francisco.
Good old San Francisco. I like how they turned it. They kept the bridge, but they had it as like a solar panel. They had a bunch of solar panels.
Oh, and by the way, that's not even a new thing to Star Trek. There have been other. I can't remember now if it might have been Star Trek, not the movie from 2009, or I can't remember now when it was, but at least once or twice before they've shown the Golden Gate Bridge with the solar panels on it. So that's actually kind of like a little sub Easter egg, which is kind of cool.
Oh yeah, there was another question she asked. She asked if he ever lost faith in Data, basically.
Yes.
And he was like, never. And she's like, and then she's like, but you lost faith in Starfleet, basically, you know?
Yeah.
And that's supposed to imply that he's siding with synthetics and and he's against.
He's an America hater.
Exactly. The synths are the synthesizers. The synthetic sympathizers.
Makes it sound cool if they're synthesizers. Are you one of those synthesizers?
Synthesizers.
I'm a sympathetic sympathizer.
Yeah. So, but the thing is like, but what's that saying is like, you would ask someone that question like that, right? Like, did you ever lose faith in Data? You would ask them like, it would make sense if it was like, did you ever lose faith in him during that time that synthetics were attacking our fucking Mars or whatever? During that time, did you lose faith in him?
Of course, he was dead by that time.
But he was dead by then, so it's like that question was total bullshit. It's
a racist question.
It was a non sequitur.
Replace synths with Muslims or Jews or whatever. That's it. It was set up to be structured that way, which was you knew one of these people, other people similar to him did some bad shit, and now like we're gonna put that taint not on that guy you used to know, and therefore on you because you're a well-known supporter of his and all that?
Yeah, and that's a lie. That's lying, is what that is when you take words out of context, subjects out of context, words out of context.
That's what Fox News does.
And it's like, this person said that thing. He said that thing. It's like, yeah, he made those noises with his mouth, but if you couldn't put them in context with the other noises he made, it means something different.
Right.
You know, it's like the argument equivalent of a pun. You know, it's just like taking words and like making them funny. It's like, you said these words and that person said those words, therefore you said the same words.
Right.
And that happens every day on Fox News and on other news outlets, honestly, but particularly on places like Fox News, where the goal is not to get at the truth. The goal is not to learn the point of view of the person you're talking to. It's to
shape
a narrative.
Yeah.
You're trying to feed into a narrative, which is why you have the guiding questions. But of course, what I liked about this is, just like in real life, that strategy can only work so far because it can also backfire, because it let Picard enter into, when Picard says, when she says Romulan lives, he's like, no, lives.
Yeah.
That's a genius.
Yeah.
And it's a powerful statement that he got to make on the air. And whatever else happened, they can say he looked like a fool for walking off or whatever. The fact is it's a pretty easy statement to be one side or the other. And now plenty of people are going to be on the other. That's the fucked up part, probably.
Yeah.
The implication at this stage, which is again where Star Trek in this case is really mimicking the current social and political climate we have.
Right.
Because we have that sort of media, we have that sort of concern. I mean, I don't know when this was written, but you could almost take this as an analogy to the Ukraine thing, where it's like, why would we help these people? Don't we have better uses of resources? The Romulans would die without our help. Mm-hmm. You could apply a lot of different analogies, contemporary analogies about race and ethnicity and nationality and culture and all that. And what I like about Star Trek, and I liked about that scene, that moment in that scene, was that Picard is able to distill all that, get rid of all the particulars, and just be like, here's an example of how fucked up that attitude is. To say you're not going to help people just because you were at war with them at one point in time.
Yeah. So his final sort of thing he said to her, basically, like, you can flip these in, make them, these images, and you can leave whenever you want. Other people don't have that sort of luxury. Now, you were saying, Patrick, earlier that's she was going, when he got up and left, that she was going for that. And that's what I was wondering, because she was going for something. Do you think she thought she was going to get a little more juice out of him? I don't know. Because like he did kind of he lost his cool, but he did hand her one during the thing. Like, so he did what made an effective sort of final statement. He got up and left. So, I guess she was satisfied, or do you think
she got him to talk shit about Starfleet?
Yeah, yes, you're right. Yeah, that's all she needed.
Publicly, like on galactic TV.
Yeah, and I wish I could remember the name. I keep saying Joban, and I don't remember the name of the other Romulan. But anyway,
yeah, she has an Irish accent.
She's an Irish actress.
Is she now? So when it cut to them, like watching him when he was starting to go into it, and they held each other's hands. I couldn't tell if that was like, oh no, he's losing his cool, or if it was like, this is gonna be like, it's not bad, but it's gonna be rough. I didn't know exactly if they were bracing for impact, or if they just were like, he's gonna lose his cool. I don't know if they were more concerned with the tough question, or if they thought he wasn't handling it well. I don't know.
It's hard to say, because those scenes were somewhat short, and I did sort of get the impression though that they thought he was doing a good thing, advocating for raising awareness for what people are dealing with. Laris.
Orla Brady.
So real quick, how about we, we're about there, but because we passed it a little bit, but what do you all think about the opening sequence, the music, the presentation?
So wait, first of all, can you remind me, when did the opening sequence, I saw this a couple times.
Right after Daj fights off the Romulan attackers who stabbed her boyfriend.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and that led to the interview, which led to the... Okay.
It's music that is similar to other sort of Star Trek theme music, and it kind of fits in the canon, if that's the word, or just the sort of the continuum of music. And it's sort of an older style of soundtrack title music. It's not like the kind of new, like Raman Djawadi kind of just like okay, Raman Djawadi did Game of Thrones and Westworld, and he's done a lot of stuff, and frankly, I think he's not.
I know you're not a fan.
I think he's a crap composer. and
I totally dig Westworld and stuff. But,
I'm not like some of those tunes that he wrote for Game of Thrones work for Game of Thrones, and some of them are all right. But as a whole, I don't really like his style.
Did you say he wrote this?
No,
he was
he
comparing it-
didn't write this.
Oh, you're
I'm comparing it to sort of like
saying
what's
that's the new style
in
versus the old
vogue.
style.
Because like
Okay.
so like when Lord of the Rings came out, Howard Shore style stuff was sort of in vogue, and now like there's
Okay,
so like
yeah.
later on you have like now Ramin Djawadi did Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones exploded, and so now and he's doing a bunch of stuff, and then there's a lot of stuff that sounds like that.
Well, near the end, like some of that it was like some violins or whatever, violins and cellos and violas and sounded a lot like what's it called? Fucking Dark Knight had that kind of like vibe, but that's not what you're talking about. But that's what I thought like the end sounded like. Some of the scenes near the end when it was getting all
interesting.
tense.
Oh, do you mean the end of the episode?
Yeah, at the
it's
end of the
actually
episode.
very reminiscent of the TOS Danger music.
Okay, I have to listen to
It's not exactly like it, but it sort of evokes that, you know.
I'll have to listen to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't think that the opening music was. I sorry to interrupted you. You can finish, but I was just gonna say like I don't think that the opening music was bad.
No, I don't think
it was. It didn't.
That's what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say. Like I think it works. I think it's sort of it harkens back to other Star Trek shows.
It wasn't the most exciting thing.
Not the most exciting, but it
And we have it. We can compare it to, and it's not just the music; it's also the visuals, I guess. But we can compare it to Discovery, which is the same composer.
Right.
And I find Discovery is a sort of a much more interesting, exciting.
I like
variation.
I did just the same.
I'm always going to say
I like
that,
the Discovery
like I think a soundtrack or a title music is going to be better. Like I'm always going to have that feeling because I'm very picky about shit.
This one with the visuals and stuff, it's tricky because I liked it, but it doesn't like awaken anything in my loins.
So
No,
what
no.
I thought first of all with the opening, I agree with you all on that, and it's kind of thing I'm wondering. I want to revisit my thoughts on that.
It's like I want to hear it again.
I want to know how I feel 6 to 7 episodes in.
Right.
You know, because
And will they change it? Will they do the Game
Right.
of Thrones? And they did that on Discovery too, where they slightly changed, like maybe not the music so much, but the
well, season 3 of
Yeah.
Enterprise, they turned it rocking. They
Yeah.
had a kicking beat to it. Here gotta blow.
I've been loving rewatching Enterprise,
Going from here
except
today.
my wife gets really mad if I don't click the skip intro on
Oh.
Netflix. You know, sometimes my phone disconnects. And I'm like, oh, I'm trying to do it. And she's like, turn this off. I'm gonna fucking shoot you.
Natalie prefers to skip the intro and just about anything that we're like sort of chain binge watching.
Yeah, I mean, I'll generally do it, but you know, if you miss it or whatever, it's not necessarily a big deal. And sometimes I like listening to like the Next Generation theme. Or
I
whatever.
dig the Next Generation.
X-Files. I
I
to keep
usually
going.
skip DS9. That's
Yeah,
what
Deep
I
Space
skip.
Nine, which I like, and I really like that opening.
I think
but,
that's perfectly respectable.
but it's
music,
long, and I
but,
don't really
yeah.
need to hear it. And they're all long.
So, but the opening, I thought the visuals were interesting.
TNG has the cool like whooshing around
Yeah.
of the.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I like
Natalie really likes that.
in the opening in Picard. I think I like how it blends the idea of space and Earth, sort of naturey stuff.
You got
sort
some
of
space, you got some Earth.
and it sort of compares it to like the structure of like life and being and stuff because
Yeah, look at this.
it just shows like I'm all thrown off.
Sorry.
God damn you.
No, I like it. No, you're right, because there's vines and stuff. There's a lot of
Yeah.
eyeball shit.
Yeah, right. It's got the whole like space and the Earth, and it's all blended
weird little
together.
crystal-y
And
cubes,
then
some
it turns
little
into
hexagon
Picard,
cubes.
and it's kind of yeah, exactly.
Like
It's kinda cool.
graphically speaking, it's sort of it's interesting and it's more sort of contemporary to tech. If you look at the opening in Discovery, it's like kind of drawings.
Yeah.
And it looks like, and it's sort of supposed to look like this is like a historical situation. Whereas the Picard stuff, it's like this is now. This is
It's a little more
this is the
esoteric.
latest kind of thing.
The Discovery opening, you immediately get the point of it. You're like, okay, Discovery, prequel, architectural drawings that evoke building something and creating something.
Right.
And you know, even if it's like sort of like, oh, what's that? It makes sense later. I suspect fully that by the time we're finished with these 10 episodes, that a lot of the opening sequence will make more sense than it did initially.
Right.
But right now it does seem to me a little bit like weirdly esoteric. Like the sky cracks open and it's not. I mean, I can
There's some kind of
use my
eyeball
English
action
major
in there.
brain to think of some like metaphors
Well,
or
it
whatever.
seems
But it's not like it's not like clear.
I mean, the image near the end of the opening seems to give away what the end of the episode sort of showed. But
Yeah.
but like I don't know, how do you do an intro though where it's supposed to be Star Trek and takes place in space, but it takes place mostly on Earth, and it probably will go more to space.
Well, they're
maybe.
going to go to space.
Yeah, but I'm just saying. What I'm trying to say is like. It's more of an Earth folk. It's
It
more
should have been more like an 80s montage where like Picard's at the mall and he's like at an arcade fighting with a kid who's better than him at Burger Boss.
Yeah, I mean they didn't go that route though, and maybe they should have.
Yeah.
But
like Small Wonder, the opening it should have been the opening theme to Small Wonder. Use the same music, but with Picard getting into all sorts of
wearing
antics.
that dress.
Well, I mean,
and then the girl could be Small Wonder.
Yeah, I was thinking. Again, that's what I was thinking. The girl's the robot. So.
Oh, I thought Picard was the robot.
No, but that's kind of funnier. It makes no sense. But neither did the opening to Small Wonder. I mean, most of the gags they had in there didn't. That was a horrifying show.
I am Vicky. Hello.
That was a.
I am a robot
show.
because I speak monotone. There was the episode where she sold weed. Or no, she found weed.
I found marijuana.
She did.
Dude,
does not compute.
I wish I could buy weed from a robot.
Yeah.
One day.
Well, one day.
I'm sure they have a weed robot in California.
A weed bot.
Like at the colleges, they all have those
Cannabot.
little robots that deliver food. They'll have those little robots that deliver marijuana.
Yeah, that's
those fucking I'm jumping ahead here, but those fucking drones in the fucking those flying fucking those fucking
in Mars.
No,
flying drones
in the fucking the Starfleet archives in San Francisco. They had all those like those drone robots flying around, and like we're not too far away from something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know about that giant room filled with what are those all hard drives or something? Like what was all that shit? But
I think they're like safety deposit boxes.
Oh yeah. Well, it made me think like, what if the internet, like when a screen is loading up, it's actually just a drone robot flying away, picking up a hard drive and putting it back. You're just sitting there waiting for it. So I'm like at home writing on my computer, and I like hit enter to go to the web page.
Enter.
Or I click go or
Carriage
whatever.
return.
And it's like accessing data, and the data really that it's accessing is just a drone robot in like across the earth. Flying across through that big Starfleet archives to grab one of those things, and it comes back. It takes like 5 minutes.
That's how the internet works.
You say this is something you think about regularly?
No, I just thought about it at that moment in time. I thought it was real neat.
I think it is. You should put that as a shower thought on Reddit.
You can always visit Starfleet headquarters and find out.
Codger does not sound like a mix of geezer and coot.
Fuck this show.
Okay.
Fuck this show.
Coot is completely different.
Maybe
codger.
Maybe Cozzer.
A geezer and a cooter.
Cozzer.
No, not a cooter. A coot.
But maybe what they're doing is
a
they're
coot is a
saying
crazy person, isn't it? Like you old coot.
I thought a cooter was a vagina.
No, a cooter is a vagina, but they didn't mention that on Star Trek.
when you think about geezer,
this episode is named Remembrance, by the way. Which is hilarious that I didn't remember to say that. I have a note here that says remember to say this was episode's named Remembrance.
What an ironic situation.
Geezer, what is the most obvious consonant in geezer is Z, but in codger doesn't have it.
What about the G? No, he said consonant.
The G,
program, man.
No, the G is. I'd say the Z is much more obvious than the G.
Geezer.
But he keeps
Geezer.
and he loses the
Geezer.
Z, and they keep the G in codger, except it's pronounced like a J because of the way it's spelled.
Well, it's because in Romulan the Z is silent.
So anyway, you're saying stuff.
What the fuck are you doing?
No,
what the fuck are you doing? You're talking about geezer.
I think
the
somebody.
strong consonant is the Z.
But it's
true
true.
that without any
I'm
evidence.
trying to understand how
Geezer.
Geezer and Coozer.
I think an actual student of linguistics
talking about definitions,
would
buddy.
side with you and completely pick apart.
He's talking about definitions, not the sound of the word.
I'm talking
geezer and
right. He's talking about definitions.
A codger, the definition he is claiming is between a geezer, which is an old withered man.
Why would he know what a coot and a geezer are, but not codger?
Because he watched a lot of, Empty Nest growing up. Like when he learned English, you know how a lot of people who come to the United States or England or Canada or Australia or New Zealand or one of the other places where they speak English, Nigeria, and they listen to the television to learn how to speak. And these Romulans came, they have no world left, and they looked in the Starfleet archives and they watched a lot of Golden Girls and Empty Nest and Too Close for Comfort.
Okay, I will go with that because I thought they were
Simon
going
and
with how
Simon.
it sounded, the words they were pronouncing. I thought
In
it was just how
that
it
Toast to
sounded.
London where they talk about dear old Patty Stewart and how he lost all his hair, and then she says like now he's bald as a coot.
Why do they replicate the cup every time when they make a drink? Why don't they just replicate the liquid into the cup?
Well, then it would just be squirting liquid into a cup.
Well, it could just appear in the
Oh,
cup.
you got to replicate the cup.
They could
And you
appear.
can get whatever cup you want.
put the cup in there, and it replicates it in the cup.
This is like, you know that old conversation about...
Then you
does
gotta
the-
wash that
Does the
cup.
shape of the
Yeah.
cup matter? Does the shape of the beer glass? Does the shape of the wine glass? Does the shape of the champagne flute matter?
Flute.
I'm on the side that says it does. And so if you're going to order a drink, you should get the appropriate thing. You're going to get a Belgian beer, you should get one of those silly little
In
goofy
like a, in a
glasses.
Belgian glass.
Yeah, a little silly little
Like a
Belgian
Stella
goofy
glass.
glass. You know?
When I was living at someone's house once, I like accidentally dropped their giant wine glass. It was one of those wine glasses that are fancy and giant.
They're hilarious.
Yeah.
I don't think they're that
And-
expensive, by the way.
And this guy who's like so like chill all the time, and he was totally chill. He was just kind of like, "Wow, that sucks." And I knew like I fucked up because I knew, and those are expensive.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Who was that?
So what do you think about what do you guys think about where we find Picard? We see the interview, we see him wake up, we all the blah 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 blah. Like right before Daj gets there, like Daj is the intervening element that gets the plot really going. So what is Picard like? Is he Picard? What's your view?
before that gets like when the introduction to Picard. What's
basically. So in other words, we have a brief period where we see Picard. He's having dreams. He's wandering around his thing. He's got his dog. He's chilling with some Romulans. He's drinking some decaf tea. What we learn a little bit about him. We see the interviews, so we know what his history is, what his attitudes are.
Well, it's interesting because in the interview she mentions about at the beginning when she's introducing him, he's like writer of notable historical works or something like
analyses.
Something about the history, and then he brings a callback to that later when he's like gets all pissed off. He's like, I'm just sitting here waiting to die, writing about history no one wants to remember and shit like that. So that kind of solidifies it, but I guess.
Right, because he was pissed that he knew that interviewer didn't know what Dunkirk was.
Yeah, and the movie only came out like last year.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
funny.
I know.
That was funny.
It's not a funny joke.
It's cool. It's all right. So that's interesting when she says Dunkirk. First he goes Dunkirk, and then she goes Dunkirk, and then his reaction is awesome. That's one of those reactions. I don't know. He's just kind of nods his head like. Mm-hmm.
He's like, yeah, you don't know.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was cool. But I guess
Patrick Stewart. I know about Dunkirk.
our first clue would be at the poker game when he says, I don't want this to end, right? And then there's another clue later where he says I like the dreams, I just don't like waking up or whatever. So you get this impression that
He also says he's all in. He says, I don't have anything else.
Yeah.
It was a weird way to phrase it. It was like not,
Yeah.
I forget the exact phrase, but it was something along the lines of like, that's everything I've got is what I think he says. So he's basically saying, I'm all in with everything I've got to this mission.
Yeah.
But he's saying it beforehand.
Yeah. I think he's not a broken man, but I think he's kind of like just
lost.
He's lost. Yeah, he seems kind of lost.
Yeah.
He hasn't given up, but he's getting there, and he needs to find something.
He's way out of his element.
Yeah,
he's way out of his element.
Yeah. So
it's like in The Big Lebowski.
Yep. Just like
pretty much the same plot.
What is that thing about? Don't worry, they're nihilists or whatever.
Yeah.
Don't worry, Donnie.
This is what happens when you fuck a stranger in the ass.
No. He thought they were Nazis. But then he was more worried about nihilists because, like, the Nazis at least have an ethos or something.
According to him,
we believe in nothing.
We believe in nothing.
One of those guys was Flea.
Yeah, I know, right? So then, of course, the other main driver of the plot, at least initially, is the Daj character. So what are your thoughts on her introduction, on who she is, what point there is to this story? Did it make sense?
Well, and I didn't notice this until the second time. When she gets attacked by those Romulans, like
the first time
she gets attacked, one of the dudes like goes speak English. So was that to imply that he was not Romulan, or
I think the first time I saw it, I thought it was that maybe, or I wasn't even thinking Romulans at that point.
Or was he just directing him to speak English because that's what she speaks?
I was thinking that it seems sort of like those old spy movies about the Cold War or whatever, or where like you're infiltrating some country and you want to speak that language so that they don't know which country. Like even if they knew some shit went down, they don't know where you're from, kind of thing.
Yeah, okay.
But I don't know if it was like a call out.
I see what you're saying. Kind of, he was just trying to hide
War
it,
type thing, or
try to hide it. Yeah. So I thought,
like, if the Cubans are coming to like check out the DNC, like they should speak English so that people can't figure out that they're coming from Cuba.
Yeah, I feel you on that. I feel you.
Romulans.
What I mean, her whole role. I mean, first of all, her role was just so Picard can realize what his new mission is. That was her whole point. Unless something crazy happens with her down the line that we don't know about, like she warped away or something.
Right.
Her whole existence was just to sort of get Picard to find himself and find his mission, and then conveniently later on there's a second one or whatever. But
right.
And
it'll probably just be her sister as a character.
Yeah, like, but so you're saying so you don't think that the first one's gonna come back?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking probably not, but you never know. Like,
it's been interesting.
I just don't know what to
see. All the comments on all the various media. Because there's a big debate about that, and I guess it'll be answered soon enough, presumably. But some people were saying, like, look, she's obviously dead. She got all, like, blowed up. But other people pointed out that they clearly set up visually and plot-wise when she tossed that one Romulan guy over and he immediately got beamed away.
Yeah.
So they already set up the concept of, like, somebody's watching out. Somebody's, like, looking over this and trying to, like, help out these things and have already beamed away one person. So conceivably they could have beamed her away, in the midst of the explosion. And if she is an android and stuff, even though like some of her face got all like acidy or whatever. The other thing that was kind of...
They made a point of saying, oh, you were the only one there. Like,
yeah, and that's didn't get confusing.
I'm confused by that point. Like, what do they mean he was the only one there?
So
like,
there could be some subterfuge.
Well, aren't they supposed to be able to detect everybody or something? Like, because Picard was talking about, only certain people have access to, find my location.
Oh,
and
that's
get to
true.
Me.
Yeah.
And so, wouldn't they have seen her up to the point in which she died? Like, I don't know what they meant.
I think I'm not worried about it yet because I'm presuming that that's part of the plot somehow, because they made it so overt that she didn't show up on the sensors when she showed up at the Chateau Picard. Right? And they show when somebody else shows up for the interview, they immediately get the alert that somebody's there. Nobody got an alert that she showed up. Nobody got an alert when she left. She just walked away without being detected. So, and clearly people are after her, and they are having some amount of difficulty, although they do seem to catch up with her pretty quick.
And it's not clear if her mom, that's got to come back later about with her mom because like her mom like is in on something. Either she was in on something or the authorities came to her house but she knew that
she's a computer program simulated mom and it's not a real thing, because there was that weird garble. Because remember she said you go back to Picard and then Daj says, how did you know I didn't mention it?
Right.
And then it goes all like blah, blah, blah. And then she's like, of course you mentioned it.
Yeah,
you know. So something's going on there. I can't tell if it's positive or negative, but I mean, I guess we can get into that a little bit in the sense that they mention, a little further down the line, we learn that in all likelihood, Commander Maddox, or whatever his rank is at this point, was involved. And he's somebody, it's another episode to put on the list of episodes to watch for some background on this series, which is A Measure of a Man, which is, or The Measure of a Man, which is the early episode where basically Starfleet, with Commander Maddox, who's an expert on AI and robotics and things, he wants to take data apart so he can create like a whole army of datas. Right. And they're all worried that could, like, first of all, that it could kill data, and that it's like, and the question is about whether Data has the right to refuse, since he's a Starfleet officer and a robot, android. And it's a wonderful episode in which Picard successfully defends Data's rights to individuality and, in fact, convinces Commander Maddox by the end. And then Data and Commander Maddox become friends, in a sense, colleagues, where they communicate with each other. And then there's that other episode, The Offspring, where Data creates Lal, his daughter, who doesn't work out in the end, but he's communicating with Commander Maddox the whole time.
So if he was able to create Lal or whatever, how did he fuck up so much on B4?
He didn't make B4. So Sung,
But he transferred to B4.
Yeah, so here's the deal, and this is what I'm interested for. We're all pretty good fans, but I'm curious how this is conveyed to diehard Star Trek fans. Although it's been very popular, so they seem not to care. But to untangle everything, and a lot of this is retconned, from later events and stuff. But long story short, if you add up every story element all the way through Nemesis and stuff, Dr. Sung made Data and Lore and Before. B4 was made prior to Data and Lore. He was one of the prototypes. And apparently there were others, but he was one of the main prototypes towards the end. But he wasn't quite there yet. Whereas Lore and Data were at the level where they were actually had their shit together. Of course, Lore had his whole fuck up brain problems. That Data, in theory, were corrected. Lal was made by Data. And the problem was he wasn't quite there yet. He couldn't keep her stable, so her brain just fell to pieces. But before it did, he downloaded Lal's mind into his brain. Then later, before he died, he attempted to download the contents of his mind, which presumably also include Lal in some form, into B4's mind. But the problem was since B4 was it's like trying to copy, play a game for a 486 on a 286, if you know what I mean, right?
I know what you mean.
286, 12 megahertz, 640K. Fuck that. That's not gonna play.
For 286
Dungeon Quest.
It wasn't 186. It was 8086.
I know 8086 and an 8088. I had an 8088.
Whoa, 8088.
Yeah, which was more fun to say.
8088.
Yeah, and they switched to Pentium because they wanted to be able to copyright stuff. Because apparently you can't copyright numbers.
Mm-hmm. Really? That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, because everyone was making their own 8086s and
everybody uses numbers.
And 286s, they were making their own equivalents, and they could call it a 286, but you can't call it a Pentium equivalent because you're not allowed to use that term.
And then they came out with they blew everything away with the Celeron processor, right?
Celeron. Fuck that Celeron.
Celeron was like Pentium if you don't quite want a Pentium.
Yeah, Pentium if you just you just can't cut it.
Just can't cut it.
Anyway.
Intel Celeron.
So in terms of she didn't die. Okay, so the whole thing was what is the theory of one positronic neuron? His theory was you could take one positronic neuron and that would have neuron that would have the robot DNA in it or whatever, and they could use it to create everything else. So why are they created in pairs then? I didn't understand. That was a weird that was a plot trick. Plot thing.
It's either a dumb plot trick or it'll turn out that it'll be explained more clearly later, but otherwise it's just some bullshit.
Because it's not for redundancy, if it was the case that you make one from one positronic neuron or whatever, in any case you could just chop bits of them up and keep 1 million copies stored in a freezer somewhere or whatever. You wouldn't need to make two full-fledged versions of each other. I don't know, unless you wanted something to compare against experimentally, but that seems arbitrary.
The other problem here is that I'm curious if their intention is to retcon the previous implication, because the previous implication was that Lore was built first. Mm-hmm. He was allowed to wander amongst the villagers of the settlement, and he freaked them the fuck out, and he got all paranoid and crazy and weird, and so they had to shut him down. And then Dr. Sung went to work on Data, and then by removing the emotions and doing some other things, in theory, it solved the problems of Lore, and then Data was able to persist.
And Data freaked out the townspeople because he was always naked.
Well, yeah, and had a giant
and fully
cock.
functional.
Yeah, he did. Fully functional and
because
excessive.
The reason why, and this is canon as far as I'm concerned, that Data has a giant penis is because... And here's
I'll tell you it's canon, all right.
Because Dr. Sung, of course, like any of us,
kind of a prick.
He was kind of a prick. You can imagine that when Dr. Sung is making androids, he's clearly a narcissist. He's made them in his own image, right? So he made them look like him. And in that process, he would give them his penis, but because he's a narcissist, because he's a man, he would inevitably inflate the size of the penis as compared to his actual penis, right? He would attach to that robot something at least 25% larger. He might not go crazy. He might not go insane larger, but at least 25% larger. So that's point number one. Point number two, it is well known that Dr. Sung did in fact have quite a large penis to begin with.
Wait a minute.
So he didn't have some tiny penis. So he had a large penis to begin with, and then his arrogance led him to create this golem, mechanical golem creature with a 25% larger penis, even still than that which he already possessed.
Yeah, because it's never big enough, right? Like,
Exactly. Well, in the mind of a man,
yeah,
it is never big enough.
Yeah, that follows. I never put them pieces together that way, but might have to review a few points. But it makes sense. I mean, I think I'm on board.
Just do a Google image search for Data's cock.
Yeah.
It'll answer all the questions you have about that and a number of other
I'm
things.
sure you'll find all sorts of stuff.
It ain't no Thanos penis, though. I'll tell you what.
Oh, yeah, that's yeah. But I mean, that's a comic book. There is a difference between a staid sci-fi classic and a comic book. Comic book penises they're gonna win out every time.
Number one is so cute. Number one is so cute.
Yeah, no, and
so is the dog.
Wait, are you talking about Commander Riker or urine?
Oh, you mean like that kind of number one, man? But yeah, giant penis, cute dog.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much.
Yeah, that sums up a lot
I thought
of
you
it.
were talking about Majel Barrett.
How was it? Where?
Because she was the original number one.
Number one, like the character.
Oh, yeah, right.
The name number one.
Right. In that Q&A episode, she kind of looked like that was supposed to be her, right? And
that was
short,
her, yeah.
short checks. Yeah, that was supposed to be her, and like she kind of looked like. And I guess that was the point because they wanted her to be her. Oh, that reminds me though, is near the end that the Romulan reclamation site, which we all know what that is.
Romulan reclamation.
They had fucking turbolift tubes in there. If you look, there's tubes in there, and I'm going to have to assume those are turbolift tubes of some kind. In that big fucking room, when they go the ship in the room, and you see in the background, you see in that giant room. I love when there's like that the scene in Star Wars when they shoot out at the first one, A New Hope, when they go it wasn't called that at first, but. When the ships go into the Death Star and they blow it up, and then Han Solo and all them are flying out. But first, before they blow up that central area, there's this huge, like, giant room, right? With this huge, giant, what I'm talking about? And they go in the ship, and it's all like, wow, 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 and they shoot it. Yeah, and it's...
Oh, like the where the laser is?
The core, when they...
gotta turn off
or
the
was that the
tractor beam.
third one? Or second one? Which is the one where they had to fly inside?
The
and
third
shoot?
Return of the Jedi is where they fly inside.
I'm sorry, I fucked up.
I think in Star Trek.
okay, this is a Star Trek
Star Wars.
podcast.
They're just on the
Star Wars.
outside, I think.
Yeah, you're right. That Star Wars is use the Force, Luke. Right, that was Star Wars.
Use the Force, Luke.
So Return of the Jedi when they fly in and fly into the Death Star to
And
blow
it's
it.
a huge core in the middle.
Yeah, huge core, right? And the huge
that was
room.
like Wedge and Lando.
Wedge and
Yeah. And I just think it's really cool when they have giant rooms in spaceships, and it's just full of giantness. It's like might as well be outside.
That's great because now I know what to get you for Christmas.
A giant,
a giant room.
It's so easy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I could like rent out. I could go to the National Portrait Gallery and be like, I'm going to rent out this whole giant courtyard room for my friend Dan. I actually have a picture of you enjoying that room. We went there once to see I think it was to see the video game exhibit they did there. And I just have a picture of you, and you're like looking at the grandeur of the, it's like a courtyard but covered.
Yes, yeah.
And you're all looking up all smiling. You're like, hey!
Yeah.
Now I know why, because it's a big fucking room.
Yeah, I have dreams about that shit.
Oh yeah, they have that funny like fountain thing. It's like a little, like river.
Yeah, they have like a weird little river of water, and people just chill out there and they're eating sandwiches.
It's always been fascinated by that.
Washington D.C. is a great place to live.
So
come on down.
Used to be the patent office, I believe.
The Patton Oswalt office.
Exactly.
Patent.
Anyways, I was just pointing out that that room was pretty big. It wasn't as big as the core in Star Wars, but that room in the Romulan reclamation site, if you looked at, there's column-looking things going through that room, and I think they're turbolift tubes. And that was like in Q&A. Remember in Q&A?
I know. It is the thing that pisses people off the most about Discovery, and I do find that's the hardest thing to defend because I'm a fan of Discovery, is that they just have a bunch of fucking tubes like in an empty space in the middle of the ship.
Yeah, right.
People are like all flying around, and they're like, this has never been what it was like before.
Right, yeah.
We've seen these turbo lifts. It's a fucking elevator shaft.
Yeah. And it looks like the fucking time circuits from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
You're right, it does. Oh my God, that's exactly what it is. Oh man.
Yeah, I mean the idea is fascinating, but that just makes me think of like Brazil or whatever. Terry Gilliam, like tubes everywhere.
All those ducks.
Bill and Ted's. Yeah,
look at all those ducks.
I need to see that movie again. I saw it in Richmond.
No, you do not.
Is it not? Is it?
That's
Brazil
right. I think I was there when we watched it.
Brazil is a wonderful movie. It's a groundbreaking movie. It's a genius movie. It is so colossally depressing. It doesn't.
Yeah,
this
it's a
time
bummer.
period we're living in does not make it any better.
Oh yeah.
I mean, yeah. By all means, watch it, but you will be in a state.
It was
For
cool,
a few
it was
days
cooler
after
to
the
watch
state.
it. It was cooler to watch it like 20 years ago.
Yeah, like in the 90s,
It's like,
it
oh,
was
that'd be
like,
crazy if that happened.
They thought this was happening. We're all actually very happy.
Yeah.
That was the 90s.
It just took a little longer.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, and Turbolift Tubes. Yeah, I
Turbo lift.
the first insurrection reference was about 20 minutes and 30 seconds. He was talking about something, I forget what it was. What was he talking about? It was not talking about before. It was talking, or maybe he's talking about when Data died or something like that.
That was in Nemesis.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant Nemesis. I meant Nemesis.
Nemesis.
No, I
This
meant
guy.
Nemesis. Whenever I talk about a reference in this episode, I mean Nemesis because they really reference Nemesis a lot. It's almost as,
Yes.
like, is it because they're trying to make up for certain plot holes not plot holes. Okay, that's the wrong word. Certain aspects of Nemesis left people like, huh, I feel like there should be more to this.
I think, okay, let's just get into it. My view on the table, Nemesis is a bad movie. There are plenty of Star Trek movies that are bad but are still entertaining because there's like a fun little Star Trek thing. There's some that are good. This is a bad movie. It was a poorly made movie.
Was it one of those things where if it wasn't Star Trek and it tried to be like Riddick or something like that, like Chronicles of Riddick, or I don't know, or Putley Wards,
there
or
are
something
bits and
like
pieces of a good concept in there, but there's stuff that they and we don't, we'll do a whole podcast episode on Nemesis because I'm open. I should watch it again. I haven't seen it in basically since it came out, so I should. I might have seen it once or twice since then, but. Despite the fact that it's not a good movie and there are a lot of problems with it, it is kind of hard not to pick up from that time. I mean, they could have done, if they wanted to do a Patrick Stewart Picard series, and they could have done anything. They could have had zero mention of Nemesis. It would have been possible, but because it involved Data's death, because it involved, the whole thing with the already getting the Romulans involved, I understand where the writers are coming from. It does make a good jumping off point. Well, do you think, especially combined with Star Trek from 2009, because of the whole blowing up the Romulan star that's mentioned in there.
But So this episode, this series is heavily focused on Data. Obviously, did they bring Data into it because of how it ended with Insurrection? I mean, because the thing is if
Nemesis.
Sorry, Jesus Christ. I'm sorry. God. All right, Nemesis. That was 5, which is better than 3. So when they, if they're gonna bring Data into it, they're gonna have to reference Nemesis. Right? They have to.
Yes.
There's no way around it.
Yes.
So
and Data and Picard's relationship was an important one, particularly in the movies. I mean, and I think it's important to note that plenty of people have a criticism of the Star Trek movies. I mean, there's a variety of criticisms of frankly, all the Next Generation movies, right? There's pluses and minuses of all of them. There's a whole, lots of debate to be had there. But one thing that they did do, for better or for worse, is it's the movies when they really focus on the Data, or they almost manufacture this Data-Picard relationship. There's a lot of stuff with Data Picard, particularly in First Contact, and then after that, they keep it up. In the show, there is Data and Picard have a very good, close relationship, but it's not. I really think it's sort of kickstarted to the next level in the Next Generation movies.
Yeah, I think that's right.
And so this is in some sense a continuation of that. That they sort of evolved into Data having this great deal of importance to Picard, and of course he regrets his involvement in the events that resulted in Data's death, because in Nemesis was a very Picard centric story.
Yeah. So there's really, they would hard. Yeah. They kind of made it so Data. Like, do you think it's possible then, though, that they could have made Picard obviously would change the whole fucking idea, but do you think they could have made Picard without a Data story, without it being a Data kind of story, and do you think it could have worked?
I think it could have worked, but I don't know that it would necessarily have been as exciting for people. I mean, that's the question. I mean, you can always come up with different stories. I mean, you could have a whole anthology series where Picard is an archaeology professor in his late years and
going on adventures.
Yeah, and his students go on adventures digging up stuff and meeting aliens and stuff like that, which I'm sure some people would prefer in some ways. Because it is important to note, as we did with Discovery and stuff, that this is a new style of Star Trek storytelling with this is a Game of Thrones style. This is a Breaking Bad style. There's an arc, there's mysteries, there's questions. I think one thing they did that was really smart, and this is indicative I think Breaking Bad is a good example, where you go into Picard, you know this basic premise, and you think it's going to go one way. And I honestly, this whole Dodge character, all this other stuff, Data and stuff, I thought it was like going to be Dodge is something that it will like unfold over time, but it's like, almost immediately you're like, okay, there's something going on here with this person, and you find most of the answers initially, like they answer questions that you would have thought they would have taken a few episodes to answer, and that creates all these new questions that you had not even prepared for, because it's obviously the questions have been answered, so you don't know where things are going to go.
Yeah, because the one thing of it is like, oh well, they just got her in there and tied some things together. Her whole arc played out. Her whole entrance was just a setup because they just got rid of her right the fuck away. And but yeah, as you pointed out, it did sort of make a setup for a whole like the foundation of the story. I could view it as a foundation of the story, and that's she's in, she's out, she gave the foundation. All right, now let's move on with the rest. Or maybe she somehow comes back or something. I don't know. But it's interesting because then he still had to have some. Okay, so they recognize that this character is important to the show because it represents a sort of lasting instance of Data, basically, and then whatever, and then some. And so they had to have her be a focus of the show. But then also Picard needs to chase something. He needs to have something to get after. He needs some kind of he needed to have something in his hands, and now it's gone, and he's trying. He doesn't have all the answers. It left right when he started to have clarity on it. Right when he began, he's like, I'm going to get some clarity on this shit. Here it is. It's gone. It's gone, and he doesn't have any more. So now they set it up that he still needs to chase that thing, but they kind of keep this character in there. So then they have her sister, and that's supposed to be somehow, I guess, so who knows? Maybe she doesn't come back. The first one.
It'll be very interesting to see because it could go, and we might as well go into what our predictions are, which is cool. We can do that. We hadn't been able to do that before.
Yeah,
what our predictions are for what's going to happen next, and we'll be proven right or wrong, or totally off next week. But we have her sister. We have that guy, the sexy Romulan guy.
Right. Weird guy. He gave up too much. He was too much TMI from the start with that guy.
Something sinister.
Is he an evil dude? Now the thing is he an evil dude, or is he a dude who we're going to be thinking is evil, but turns out he's not?
I think he's a fucking weirdo. She brings up her...
But he had that scraggly beard, which was kind of cute.
You're talking about that weird Romulan kid at the end.
Yeah.
Did he have a beard? Oh yeah, he did have a beard. Yeah, he kind of reminded me of like Discovery Spock when.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
But the other question is I think the way they set up that scene is that guy seems sinister, and then we have already identified with the person who with Dodge. Soji looks just like Dodge, but that doesn't mean she's a good guy. Maybe she's working with the bad guys.
She might be the bad twin.
Yeah, and that's the other kind of thing. And that's
are they doing the Data lore thing kind of thing?
Right. But when I was saying he's weird, it's like she's casually bringing up her sister, right? And then he launches into this weird sort of trailing off thing about like, oh yeah, I had a brother, he died, and now I'm really weirded out, but I lost him. Yeah, and that's fucking intense for someone to like talk about. It's like if you want to talk about your dead relatives on the first meeting with somebody, like if they ask you something directly, sure, don't lie, but why would you just suddenly talk about your dead brother right off the bat? I don't know. And it's made him seem like creepy and fucking
he's
weird.
Synthetic too.
Maybe he's trying to be human and he doesn't know. Maybe he is a failed attempt at a synthetic because they couldn't quite get Data right. And so he does weird shit like that because he's like a...
My brother died.
Yeah. This is what humans hear.
Quite unexpectedly. I killed him.
Oh, man.
So clearly, another thing to predict, I don't know if it'll be next episode or if it's something they're going to save for down the line, but it seems like Commander Maddox is going to get involved in here, or whatever rank he is.
Yeah.
Maddox is...
He has to.
You'd presume. Now, the question is he still Commander Maddox and just is in hiding? Did he get like kidnapped and they like killed him, but they like copied his brain thoughts or something? There's all this Borg stuff. So like, since we know he was trying to make some like super android, was he experimenting with Borg stuff and maybe on himself experimenting with Borg stuff, or what? The other thing that makes it really hard to judge is, there's that whole scene where Picard is basically laying it out to Daj that she might be an artificial being, and
he condescends her about her memory too.
Yeah.
He's like, "That's a beautiful memory you have, but it's fucking bullshit."
Well, no, okay, that's one perspective. The other perspective is he handled it very deftly and sweetly. It's like, no, that's your memories. It's yours. No one can take it from you. You're like, this is fucking bullshit. You're a fucking donut.
Yeah, I believe that you believe that you're supposed to be
That was
here.
more condescending. But in that scene, they lay down. They don't make it explicit. They don't say that she has implanted memories. He implies that that's a possibility, but maybe not. So it could be that she is an organic android that was born and raised like in some sort of gloopy slurry, some sort of biological juices.
This is like this is some Blade Runner shit.
Or more like Blade Runner. Blade Runner, they have them implanted, and so they have retroactive memories. In which case, her and her sister maybe have a completely different deal going on. I've heard some people ask, do they know each other? Did they grow up together? Because obviously Soji is referring to a sister. Does she mean Daj? Does she mean another, like yet another one?
Oh, right. There's another. Could be another.
Daj never mentioned a sister, and she didn't like call her sister. So does she know about it? Is this somebody she thinks she was raised with, or does she in the role of being a sleeper agent or whatever the deal is, where she's not quote unquote activated? Does that mean that whatever memories you have are completely separate from, Soji and the others, whatever? Because there's an implication that there's going to be a lot of other android action. Obviously, the quote-unquote synths that look kind of like skinny old-school Datas that we've seen flashes of.
So, yeah, it could be a thing like where it's because she revealed at the beginning when she got activated or whatever, suddenly she gets this flood of memories. So maybe she'll have another sort of round of a flood of memories while she'll remember her sister or something like that. When you were talking about they have one of the possibilities is these retroactive planted memory chips. Now, and that implication is that they would be planted those chips, but then they would lead their separate lives after that. Yeah. So they share the same memory, but then they'd have separate experiences. But what they were saying is you can recreate data from one positronic neuron is what what's her name was saying. That actor was in Scott Pilgrim versus the World. And Goon, I think too. That movie with Sean.
Her name is Pill.
Alison Pill. Yeah, she's very good.
Yeah.
She's got some teeth on her.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. She smiles like a British,
She's
the newest.
from Canada.
So I watch a lot of these British panel shows and, all these comedy game shows and stuff like that. It's really great over there. They stole it from us from the 40s, but they kept it.
They kept it true.
They kept it true and we didn't.
Yeah, that's true.
But one thing you notice on these panel shows is you notice the evolution of the British tooth.
Oh, man.
Or I should say teeth. In that, traditionally, as we know, the old joke is British people have bad teeth. And part of what makes the joke funny is it was somewhat true in the sense that the Brits for a long time didn't have the same obsession that Americans had with like braces and teeth whitening and stuff like that, right? So it's not that their teeth were bad per se. It's just that they didn't wrestle with their teeth to make them all perfect. That has started to change, and I think the first person you saw it with was what's his name from American Idol, where he basically has like the most perfect teeth ever, and you're starting to see that a lot more with these British people where they have these like perfect teeth. And Alison Pill had that kind of like she did that weird
Simon.
Yeah, Simon Cowell. Alison Pill did that sort of like a monkey laugh, like
yeah, that was a weird laugh.
And her teeth are just like emerging like the alien.
Yeah, that was weird because he was asking her about a question about robots. He's like, huh, what? And then she's like, yeah, well, I mean, we did, yeah. She's like, I don't know. Anyways, yeah. So
it was almost Tilly-ish in some ways. There was like hints of Tilly, like a more mature cadet Tilly.
She definitely was a little socially awkward.
Little bit, but she works on.
She's a scientist
on like simulated robot brains.
Yeah. So, wait. Did you finish your? What was you getting at with her teeth?
I was just making a completely unfair and uncalled for comment about her teeth. Not meant to be negative, by the way. I think she's a great actress, great looking. But I did want to comment, and if you watch it again, you'll see it. Her teeth are like this perfect fucking arch of teeth. It's amazing.
Oh, yeah, those are good teeth. I'm looking at a picture of it right there.
There you go. Do a Google search for Alison Pill teeth. Right after you search
Pill
for
teeth.
Data's cock.
Okay, right after. Writing that down.
Maybe you'll see pictures that have both.
So... Oh, my gosh. Rule 34 or whatever.
Yeah, there's everything for everybody. Infinite diversity and infinite combinations.
So there was the idea of the retroactive memory, right? And they live their separate lives. But if you're capable of recreating data from one positronic neuron, could you have it so that they are wirelessly connected, essentially? So they can just share. They could set.
Sure. I mean, so I don't think that's separate from the positronic neuron thing. I'm curious to see where they're gonna go with that, because that whole quantum positronic neuron thing or something, that's taking Star Trek technobabble like quite a distance, but I think it's allowable depending on where it goes. I think it becomes problematic if the idea is in the end like somehow like they're going to get data back, but I kind of don't think that's the direction they're going. I think they're going more for the protecting his legacy versus resurrecting him.
Well, the difficulty in replicating data though is not through that. That's what I wasn't getting, is they need his like nervous system or whatever. They were saying something about they need his.
It's the brain juices. It's all the brain juices. Bits,
So if they,
that's what nobody's been able to replicate.
But the positronic neuron is just like information, like DNA, basically, right? Isn't that? I guess
that's the theory behind it, and I think.
But the problem, they couldn't replicate his nervous system.
If you wanted to be pedantic and complain about it, I think you could have an argument that this is sort of a weakness in the story point. If it's like you need one neuron and then somehow you get the whole brain back, because that's sort of it depends how they present it. We'll see how it.
It's just difficult to lay down why it's so hard to replicate data, and I know it's the idea is like. He's that's what makes him a life, like
previously
you can't make it the same, just like with the human or whatever, but.
And again, I think it was such a quick thing towards the end of this episode, so we'll really have to see how they flesh it out. But the previous way they handled that was just much more simple, which was they didn't say why they couldn't do it. They just said they couldn't.
Yeah,
they kept saying
right.
like Soong managed it. None of the rest of us motherfuckers have ever managed it. Maddox tried. All these other motherfuckers tried. They got close, but they couldn't manage it. That, and then you have the Doctor on Voyager who like became sentient just after being around for a while, I guess.
Became funny. Fractal neuronic cloning. Fractal neuronic cloning.
Fractal neuronic colostomy.
Bag. Moronic colostomy.
That's fucked up, man. That's fucked up. That's a serious condition.
Yeah, it is. It's not right.
All right, so what are we got to close up shop soon. So what are some of your favorite scenes from the episode?
That scene where she fucking kicks all those dudes' asses. First of all, one of the Romulan guys, those guns were awesome. They
were kind of cool.
Yeah, they lived in their arm, and then when they stretched them out, they just like kind of one on either side. And it seemed super efficient, and you get two shots, two sides of the shot. It was fucking badass. When she jumped, when I was watching that jump, at first I was wondering, is this gonna be cool or is this kind of cheesy? But is this still Star Trek or is this too out of hand? I was like
Terminator-y.
Yeah, right. But I was like, it's fine. I don't know.
It makes sense too.
Yeah.
I mean, one presumes, if she is indeed an android of some sort. Granted, you get into this debate, android, but they're biological, is like, well, if they're biological, don't they have some of the weaknesses of biology? But maybe not. So
biology. So one thing, just like I'm like really fascinated with large closed spaces that are really large, I'm fascinated with the idea of jumping far distances. I always loved, even though it makes really no sense, that the Incredible Hulk supposedly could jump far. He was so strong that he could like jump forever, which it doesn't make any sense.
Well, do you remember that the original Superman, Kal-El, back in the day, he couldn't fly, he could just jump massive building.
Right.
And then eventually he could just jump into orbit basically and fly.
Yeah. And I was actually able to buy into that a little bit. It is also that's actually an interesting history note of Superman, though, that he couldn't fly at first. He could leap over tall buildings because he couldn't fly. But for some reason with the Hulk, if this guy is just a dude like super strong, like I don't see any big strong guys jumping that far.
Yeah.
But, but it's cool. It's
not winning any dunk contests at the strongman competition.
No, that would be badass if that was one of the.
That's gonna be a new thing.
A good idea. No, but it's okay. It's not really a complaint.
They would break the basketball when they dribbled it once.
Yeah, they'd have to
just go poof.
It got me thinking, what does basketball look like in Andre the Giant's hand? But
it would look all cute.
It'd look adorable.
Oh, cute and adorable.
Yeah, like those when he had that picture of a beer can in his hand. It looks like those little little chubbies, those little couple inch drinks.
I know all about the little chubbies.
The little chubbies. Okay, so I'm sorry, I got on a tangent.
Best scenes.
I do. By the way, I don't complain about that about the Hulk. I think Hulk is pretty rad. But so she was jumping. Like, I'm fascinated with large rooms and shit. I really like the idea of being able to jump and far like that and have them presented in a believable sort of physical implementation, not just look silly like, oh, he just jumped and it looks stupid. I want to it's cool when it looks kind of real, like it could have happened or something.
I agree. I think the fight scenes were good. They were well choreographed and they were not too much. This was nice. It wasn't this constant, because as much as I love Discovery, I do, depending on my mood and the plot, like the frenetic pacing does get a little annoying sometimes, whereas I thought here it was you could see, you understood where the action was happening, you knew exactly what was happening at any given time, and there was some cool stuff going on there, like when she was like breaking some dude's arm, and then that one dude when he gets, how there's the guy who gets flipped over the railing and gets beamed away, but before that is the guy who just sort of like hits the railing and he's all like, and it looked horrible.
It looked like a stunt gone wrong or something, but it was really awesome. Even though the funniest part of that scene is when she suplexed that dude. That was fucking amazing.
And cracked his helmet thing.
Yeah,
and shortly thereafter.
And she just it was like a WWE suplex or MMA or whatever. Back arch is what they would call those in wrestling. But that totally, even though you couldn't see her face, it's like, of course, it's not a complaint. Of course, it's a stunt double. But that really looked awkward when I kept playing that scene over and over, that one part, and it just totally didn't. It kind of was a little jarring, but I thought it was super awesome. So yeah, I thought the fight scenes were pretty rad, for the most part. Yeah.
What about you, Jesse? What do you think?
Well, I liked in the beginning when he wakes up from his dream and he's telling the dog it's okay, or he's saying something like it's going to be okay, and then he looks out the window and he sees his vineyards and he's like, oh, it's okay, and you're like,
yeah,
he's just like, oh.
It was a nice scene. I was watching that with Atom, and I said, dude, you got to earn some money, buy a chateau like that, because that's gonna be, it's a pretty nice view to wake up in.
It looked like a pretty fucking chill place to live, and
but you can tell that it's he already said that he doesn't like to, he doesn't want the dream to end.
Yeah. And his end of his dream
is up
like,
and he's just like, okay, this is my life. And he's like looking out the window. It's just like, oh.
Yeah,
I know. It's like, I even though it's kind of funny on the one hand, I do think that subtly, sort of the point is, this guy. You look at his bedroom. You look at his bed and how cozy and wonderful everything looks. And he opens up these windows to this beautiful vista. He owns this vineyard, and people are hustling and bustling and doing some stuff, and there's beautiful mountains in the background, and he's still fucking depressed about it, which is, that's
depression.
A point. That's depression. It's like he's living this wonderful, literally, presumably doing exactly what he wants, writing history books and stuff, and he's unsatisfied by it.
When you wake up in the morning and you're like, that's depression.
And as a side note on depression, it's really sucks because that's depression, right? And then people give you shit. It's like, you got everything. You got
should be happy.
Yeah, right.
I got depression.
Yeah, right.
You got a whole vineyard out there.
Yeah.
Buck up, Jean-Luc. That's his neighbor.
Come on, Jean-Luc.
His neighbor Hank lives at the next winery over.
The winery next door.
Yeah, that's how it works in France.
They do. No, speaking of French, he actually the
guy on the other side just grows lavender.
Is that a French thing to do? Grow lavender?
Oh yeah.
What do you do with lavender other than put it in soap and candles?
You put it in soap and candles.
You use it to keep the scorpions.
You also
scorpions.
They apparently, I don't know how true this is, but I did read an actual scientific study. It wasn't some bullshit thing that there was an indication that it's not good for young boys to have too much lavender because it does some sort of hormonal.
It closes up their urethra.
I did read that it affected their hormones. Hank reduced.
Somebody's neighbor Hank. Now it's a narrow urethra.
Oh, I didn't get that. Yeah, we were talking before about the Hank Hill.
Right on, dude.
Because he has a narrow urethra, and Dan was suggesting that he has a narrow urethra, and because he has a narrow penis. And I was arguing that in fact he has
it's a big meaty one.
It's like a meaty penis, and that's what's crushing his urethra.
It's
closed up.
It's crowding his urethra. Yeah.
But anyway, that's for the King of the Hill podcast.
Yeah,
which will be down the line.
Down the line. But speaking of French and speaking to his dog. He actually spoke French. Did he ever really speak much French?
No, he was this was the Frenchest he's ever been.
Yeah. And he's
He
all
was
like,
in France. He was speaking French. He was still drinking fucking Earl Grey tea, but
which apparently
he was still French.
Behind the scenes tidbit, I haven't confirmed this, but I heard a rumor that said that in Patrick Stewart actually doesn't like Earl Grey, so every time he was drinking Earl Grey, he's actually drinking some sort of like English
Scotch
breakfast tea or something. No, it's like a different kind of tea that he actually prefers.
Just a different tea.
What was it like? Mel Blanc couldn't stand carrots or something, and so when he would do he had to actually eat those motherfuckers.
Yeah.
So he had a bucket to spit them in or something. Yeah, because nothing sounded like carrot when they chewed on it. So, he speaks French.
And people complained about that, of course.
Oh, really?
I part of the fun of Star Trek is nitpicking, and the even better part of Star Trek.
Oh, is that why? Was it on the side they thought he did a poor job, or people just thought it was lame?
No. I don't think anyone thought it was lame. It was a critique of both a few things. His accent, primarily, which is like, it's all right. He's a British dude. Get over it. Secondly, he apparently used the wrong verb for, we've like practiced this because and this was such an interesting debate. I was reading these people arguing on Reddit because in France, and I don't know the exact words, but he said practicar or something like that. And, that's apparently not the right verb for the context of practicing a skill.
Yeah, I know what you're getting
right?
at, yeah.
So he used a word that but the twist is, according to some other people, in French Canada, they do use that verb because it's like an older version of French, right? So they actually do use that. And a lot of the Star Trek production offices are, they're centralized in Canada. So they might have been influenced by the French Canadian usage. Fascinating, no doubt. But... FYI, I wanted to get it out there so everyone understood what was going on here with that dog scene.
That got me thinking about Spanish, and there's some, I can't think of the example I was thinking of in Spanish, but it was like no mucho versus no something, no malo. I can't remember.
That's exactly, what are you going to do?
What are you going to do?
I like the scenes you guys are talking about. For me, I really like the interview scene because, again, I think there were some powerful things there. I had a difficulty picking certain things because I just found the overall vibe really cool. It was neat to see like running through the streets of future Paris, Boston skyline, the Okinawa stuff. These are places we've never seen in there's a little bit of Paris in a little bit of Star Trek, but for the most part, we haven't ever seen these places in Star Trek before. I don't even think they've ever fucking mentioned Okinawa. Boston.
Yeah.
Right. Boston. That was like,
I like the establishing shot of like future France and stuff like that.
But they also did a couple. They did one thing it's subtle and it's frankly an old trick. This is nothing creative or innovative. But it doesn't have to be if it's done well and works well, and I thought they did it really well, which is Picard starts out the episode using a cane. And as the episode progresses, he's using the cane less and less until he's simply not using it.
He's fucking running at one point.
Yeah, and it's sort of as he gets more as he gets more wrapped up in the adventure, if you watch the episode, the cane recedes until it's not there anymore.
Interesting.
And that is a subtle indicator. Even if you don't see it, your brain picks up on it that something's changing in him as he becomes invigorated by this mission that he's taking on for himself.
That's interesting. I'll have to watch for that. And that's kind of like a smooth transition. That immediately made me think of like there was a sudden transition in Big Lebowski when Donnie suddenly doesn't get a strike. Because Donnie gets a strike every time.
Like I said, this is basically the plot of The Big Lebowski.
This is the same fucking thing. I remembered my example I was thinking of. It's no mucho versus nada mucho. If you say what's going on, you say not much. I remember reading somewhere to say nada mucho, but like whenever all the dudes I talked to who spoke Spanish are like, no, it's no mucho. You don't say nada mucho. But who knows? It could be like a dialect thing.
Well, that's part of the fun of
places,
language because there is that's what makes language both fascinating and difficult to get into because of those nuances, that are really fun. I mean, English has a fucking boatload of them. That's why we have so many fucking words in English because we have 10 words for every single concept and they all mean like some slightly different thing.
Oh, man.
Okay, so those are great scenes, great things about it. What are some problematic things? I might start it out. Overall, I thought this was a great episode, and honestly, I know there's recency bias. This is like nearing the top of the list for Star Trek pilots in terms of the quality. It got me really engaged in the story, very interested to see what would happen next. Normally, otherwise Emissaries, normally my number one because for the exact same reasons. It's well written. It introduces some really interesting mysteries and stories that you can look forward to unfolding over the coming seasons. So this really did that. But there were a couple little nitpicky things, and for me, it's such a stupid little thing, because I really thought the pacing and the direction of the vast majority of the episode was really good, but for some reason, right after the opening credits, when you see Picard, you see the Chateau Picard, and then it's Picard walking around, and then walking around a little further, then he takes off his hat and stuff. They edited it using these fades to pretend like it was slow and meditative, but it was not. It was a trick. It was still fast editing. It's just instead of cuts, they just did these slow fades. But because the slow fades happened too close to each other, it didn't give you time to adjust to, like, you're supposed to be settling into this man's living a slow life on a vineyard. And it's really more like, oh, he's here, and then, oh, he's there, and his hat's off, and there's a dog, and then like all of a sudden he's just talking to people. So that was a very minor, I know they just had to get into it, but I watch a lot of British murder mysteries and stuff, and they do a great job of like just sort of like having the camera slowly ease into somebody walking along,
So you felt like it didn't, the way the editing, now this is just an editing thing. Like in the end, the same idea, like you got what they were getting at.
Yes.
But like the editing you're saying was not properly portraying the idea that his life is slow.
They should have either extended it or just had two shots or something, because the effect the effect was it's like fade into this and then fade into this. Like it starts the fade out of the next scene before the first scene is finished fading in. It's if you go back and look at it, you'll see that it's a little, to me, it jumps out as a little bit awkward. Not a big deal. I don't think most people would care about that, but that's why I mention it, because I'm a peculiar person.
After he got knocked out when Dodge got burned up or whatever, he just kind of woke up on a couch. That was weird. They didn't make a big enough deal out of that.
Right. Like, how did he get to the couch?
It's just like, the police didn't interrogate you.
Yeah. It's just like, he's out for a week and they go, you had quite a spill, you gave us quite a fright.
There was a big explosion. And it's Admiral Picard. I hope he's okay.
Yeah.
Let's just send him home. What the hell is he doing here? We don't care. He's Captain Picard.
He was in a coma for a week on his couch. I thought that was a little awkward.
I agree. It was somewhat weird.
Yeah. This isn't really a critic. Well, okay. Well, first of all, this was kind of a cheesily delivered line when he's all like, I guess when Dodge's sister and creepy Romulan stalker is saying, he says to her, he's like, I guess you don't want to hear about this weird shit, and she's like, guess again. I thought that was kind of like a cheesy little line.
There were a couple.
Yeah, but it wasn't bad.
What did you think about the dude line? Because that's another thing blowing up the internet. I didn't even really pay attention to it when it happened. So just to clarify, right at the beginning when we're introduced to Dodge, and she says she's accepted to the Daystrom Institute, and he says, oh, well, cool, that's awesome. Are you going to do robotics? And she was all like, dude, I'm a fellow in cyber.
Yeah.
But some people on the internet are like, oh, we wouldn't be saying dude. We wouldn't in the 25th century. We would not be saying that.
I kind of like it.
It's ridiculous.
I kind of like it.
No matter how likely or not it is to be saying dude, then like there's no way to know. There's no reason to speculate.
I agree. And
there's
also,
no reason to speculate on that at all.
And I haven't heard any, and as a counterpoint, I haven't heard anybody, I'm sure it's happened, but I just haven't seen it yet. I have not seen anybody complain about the fact that her boyfriend, when he goes to the replicator and he's looking and he's making fun of her replicator programming, he's like, your replicator menu is tragic. Which what's that, like late 80s or something, and maybe a little bit come back in the mid 2000s. It's that's also sort of an archaic and anachronistic. People don't even really say that. I mean, maybe they do say that these days. I don't know what the kids are up to.
I guess there's a common complaint with these time travel. And this is not a time traveling thing, but sort of on a lateral maneuver, time traveling stuff. They always tend to go back to now, right?
Yeah.
When the future goes back in time, they always go back to today. So maybe there is a complaint that, they're grasping too hard to relate to today's people or something. But like you said, the tragic line, that was weird. That's like, that was
granted, she's from Seattle.
Okay, yeah.
So like her saying dude, I mean, people in Seattle say dude.
They say dude.
Sometimes they drink a lot of coffee.
I wasn't totally great with, and this is what I was going to say is not really a complaint. When she's coming to Picard and she starts crying and he's like, please calm yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Calm yourself. It's like, she's crying, man. Let her experience her emotions, Why is he trying to stifle her emotions? Now, the counterpoint to that is you could say he wasn't stifling her emotions. He wasn't telling her, because I knew someone who would say when somebody starts crying, they were all against the idea of handing them a tissue. They're like, don't hand them hand them a tissue. When you hand them a tissue, you're telling them that they shouldn't be crying. You know, some kind of weird shit like that.
Instead, you should lick their tears.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Slurp the tears right off.
Yeah.
their
See,
face.
now that's a message too.
Aren't you just helping them from getting like goo on themselves?
Yeah, right. And that's the practical end of it. And then if somebody wants to really look deep into it, they could say you're trying to tell them that they're doing something wrong.
I think one of the issues, and I'm agreeing with you because I do think that was a little bit awkward. I do think it's important. It's less important to argue to get people together on the same page in terms of how you're supposed to act versus how you're supposed to understand, right? So if the person understands that this person is dealing with something emotional and their goal is to be an ally in helping them in whatever help they may or may not need, then that's cool. Give the tissue, don't give the tissue, whatever. Where I think the issue is if you like you said, or like, no, you shouldn't be crying. Stop crying. That's bad. If you stop crying, you'll no longer be sad.
Yeah, right. Smile. Smile all the time. Give us a nice nervous smile. Yeah. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, and so I tend to lean in that direction. Maybe it was just more like he was trying to center her and focus. Because like the other aspect, I guess there's a concern that she was starting to panic and like maybe she would, just have an emotional. It's like you can have an emotional sort of over.
If it was James
overloading.
Bond, if it was like the man, if it was James Bond, Sean Connery style, he just would have slapped her across the face.
Right, and you don't want to do that method. That's not what Picard.
Well, who's to say
for.
that's not what works in the future?
Right? Yeah. Who's to say? People do different things.
Come on, dude.
All right.
So anyway,
any other nitpicks?
Well, I was just gonna say that that scene also led it into he offered her some Earl Grey, and I thought that's kind of neat. It's like Earl Grey really anchors him, right? It really centers him, and he can do all the sorts of shit. And he can handle all sorts of shit.
It's like Popeye with the spinach.
It's
Picard,
It's
Earl Grey. That scene, actually, that's a good point. I thought that was a really lovely scene. It was lovely set up in his little courtyard. They were sitting in some simple little chairs having a conversation.
The dog was cute when he talked to the dog.
Yeah, and the dog was like,
yeah.
How about you, Jesse? Any particular nitpicks?
Not really, but I was thinking about when I first in the beginning when he's playing cards and it shows him with a glass of something. It took me a while to be like, oh, of course it's tea because he's known for tea. I was thinking he was just drinking some kind of single malt or something. I was like, well, no, Picard doesn't drink no single
What's interesting
malt.
about that scene is he takes his tea with cream, which he does not normally do. Which is another. I don't know if that's another thing. Probably just to indicate it was a dream. Another. There are of course a lot of clues. Sorry, Dan, but there are a lot of clues that say it was a dream. But I think that was one of them. Is that he's like pouring, he's all like cream, milk, and he just like pours it in there. It's like, wait, what the fuck? He doesn't drink tea with milk usually.
Yeah. What were those rooms in the Starfleet archives? Those
rooms?
Big
giant rooms.
Those giant fucking rooms.
The smaller giant rooms.
The smaller giant. The ones where they just had a room with all the TNG shit in there.
People said it was like Attack of the Clones. It was like because there's like the Jedi library or Jedi archive, and it's kind of like a similar thing in Attack of the Clones when they're like looking through that. And it's not really similar, but in Blade Runner 2049, there's also a sort of an archive room that's sort of a similar concept.
Like, who are these rooms open to? Why do you have a room just sitting with all this open space with, a bat lift here and a thing there and a painting there? And
I think you could argue, well, he's a Starfleet admiral and he's a well-decorated guy. I think the idea is you get different sizes. First of all, it's like Starfleet archives, right? So it's not for everybody. It's just for people who are Starfleet. Like I'm sure Captain Kirk has a room in there somewhere, and so does Captain Spock, but Ambassador Spock. But I also got the impression when you look at the room, because especially when you watch it a second or third time, there seemed to be, like you were saying, there's all these like walls and stuff. I think I was joking before when I said it's safety deposit boxes, but I honestly think that's basically what it is, in that your everyday, like, Dwight, your
Dwight Schrute.
Yeah, you're Dwight Schrute. I was going to say Dwight Schultz, but Barkley, you got your certain people and they get like a little drawer. And then other people who are historical, huge, famous figures, they are the ones that get like the room size to put their stuff in.
I wonder if it's like a storage unit where where they could sleep in it. They're not supposed to sleep in it, but if they're having a rough time
like,
of it, maybe they totally
Picard's
could.
like down on his luck.
Yeah, and he's like, well, I got to sleep there.
He like uses Worf's batleth as a pillow.
That's a pillow. Yeah, that's the first thought.
Like, this is what Commander Worf would have wanted. All right, so let's move on real quick. Two things to go over. Let's go over some Easter eggs. We won't be able to catch them all because this is how it's done now. You jam a bunch of Easter eggs in. That room, of course, was filled with a ton of Easter eggs, that archive room. So we don't need to be exhaustive, but things that might be interesting to people. I'll just go through the list real quick, and you guys add in anything that you saw that I've missed, and the listeners can, of course, complain that we missed all this other obvious stuff. So first of all, I don't know if this counts as an Easter egg, but they still don't play poker properly in the future. Like, they did this all the time on The Next Generation where they didn't bet properly. Like, the betting structure, like... It didn't make any sense. That doesn't work that way where they're just going back and forth and all this other stuff. It's either a Dixon Hill hat or the hat that Data wore when he joined Picard on the Dixon Hill hologram, like season 1 style. Like when Picard is fixing his knot in front of the mirror right before the interview, if you look behind him, there's a hat rack, and it's a straight up like fedora that's exactly like that. And I can't remember if it because like he and Data wore similar hats. And if it's his hat, then it's just because it's his hat. If it's Data's hat, that's kind of like got extra meaning because he's trying to keep Data's hat. So I'd have to double check and see which one it is by like looking at pictures. Was that painting ever? Was that invented now? No, but I'll get to that because there's a very interesting thing. I'll save that for the end because there's something very interesting about the painting stuff. So Picard's replicator in his house is almost identical to the one he had in his ready room. Like they had the same pattern and everything. Like it's clearly different, but like designed almost in the same way. There was a Cassidy Yates ad in Boston. I didn't see this. I saw this on the internet. When you see the Boston skyline, you see two key things. There's a Ferengi Alliance symbol, like on the sides of one of the buildings, and there's a digital billboard that says Cassidy Yates. That presumably she's still around and running her shipping company or something, and maybe she's advertising her galactic shipping company there. Of course, Enterprise D, that counts as one, I think. Data painting, that's kind of an Easter egg that they pull that in. We talked about Picard's vault, of course, is filled with all sorts of stuff. It has the Enterprise E model in there, has a Stargazer model, has the captain's yacht from the which is annoying because I hate that captain's fucking yacht. It's such a stupid thing, but they have that. They have the batleth he got from when he helped out Worf in front of the Klingon High Command. And I imagine there's a lot of other things in there that you could catch. Of course, his dog being named number 1. The Zahian boyfriend. That's a Discovery Easter egg, which is kind of cool. Sound effects all over the motherfucking place. Like they did a really good job. The doors sounded straight up TNG. They had a lot of the blood. When they were fixing her head with the little medical thing, that was a really TNG sound. Yeah. They kept real close to the TNG style. But the data painting thing is interesting because when you look it up, she says circa 2369 was when he painted those two paintings. And when you match that up to the actual seasons of Star Trek, that's right around the time of like season 6, and I think it's like the Birthright, the 2-episode part of Birthright, where Data starts his dreaming program. It's like he discovers like the dreaming program, and then dreaming becomes like really important to him. And it sort of combines, like he has the dreams and he has the painting, and then of course he has the daughter Lol. And those are all combined into what we're seeing in this series, it seems anyway, that those are all relevant. So it was just very interesting that they picked a time when Data's painting and his dreams were both of key importance to him. So they did their research and trying to figure out when to date when he painted the painting, because him painting it at that time makes sense because he was painting stuff from his dreams.
When was the first time they discussed Picard and his vineyard? I forgot the fucking word vineyard. Was it the first time? Wasn't so? There was a in All Good Things. He's back at the vineyard.
Well,
when was the first time?
The first one was after the second part of Best of Both Worlds, right? So
Yeah.
when he gets back, so there's Best of Both Worlds Part 1, closes out the 3rd season. Picard is Locutus of Borg. And at that point, I think they hadn't even signed Patrick Stewart back up. It was, they wrote it that way partly because he might not have been coming back to the show.
Interesting.
And the last line of that show is considered one of the best cliffhangers in Star Trek history, where Riker says "fire," because they have a plan to blow up that Borg cube that's got fucking Picard sitting right there on it. At the conclusion of the second part, he of course gets rescued, and in the next episode, he is it's that episode Family. That's where he goes back to his vineyard, sort of to recuperate, because the Enterprise needs to, all sorts of stuff is going on because the Borg shit was bad, so the Enterprise needs to regroup. Everybody needs to regroup. The Enterprise needs to get fixed up. So they're back at Earth, and he's visiting his brother on the family vineyard. So I think that might be. I don't know if they mentioned. There may have been an earlier mention that he had a vineyard, but that's the first time we go to the vineyard. Is in that episode, in the second episode of the 4th season, I believe.
I mean, I don't know if the vineyard itself is considered an Easter egg, but it is kind of neat that like Jesse, you were saying earlier about the opening shot on his vineyard, and it brings back memories of all those other times, you saw it in the series, and it's like, it's familiar, it makes the whole thing feel familiar. It's like, oh, he's fine. It's almost like the story, that part of the plot line began before it actually did, meaning like, it's like when they take something and run with it when it was never necessarily meant to be panned out in that direction. And this one, they embraced that vineyard idea. I mean, I guess they couldn't really get away from it, but I just think that was pretty cool that they sort of went that went that direction. It was just kind of, it was nice. It was an Easter egg. I consider it an Easter egg. I say it's an Easter egg. Do you say it's an Easter egg?
I think using Picard is an Easter egg.
Yeah, god damn it.
No, I agree. I think what is who cares what a fucking Easter egg is? You could say that Picard and some of that stuff. You could even say the data painting stuff is not an Easter egg because I guess it's a plot point.
Yeah.
But I don't agree. I think you can count. There's a gradation. There's a spectrum of Easter eggs, right?
I take it back. It's like Easter egg has to be some kind of like
little side boobab.
Yeah, little side doobers that where you're just like but like
the vineyard is his non-spaceship life.
Yeah,
it was something he was never meant to do. He's a spaceship guy.
Yeah, he left it early.
He's not a vineyard guy.
In fact, the whole problem his brother had was that he felt abandoned by Picard. That Picard was supposed to, he should have been there to help out, but he was left behind basically to go by himself.
Yeah, it's too important to the story to be considered a side mission. So,
are there any that you can remember that I missed from this list? And of course, this is not an exhaustive list, as I said. If you go online, I'm sure you'll find all sorts of stuff, like in the skylines and stuff like that. I think there's some cool stuff.
Not really that I can think of. I keep thinking about back to the subject of things that were from before that are part of the plot. I keep thinking about the Borg ship. The subject of Easter eggs has obviously gotten me remembering things in general from Remembrance of B4. Every time on my notes I wrote B4, I just wrote B4 just to be like
an asshole.
And I had to tell you about it, so I didn't seem completely weird about that. But I liked how everything was so green suddenly. I don't remember the Borg ship being that green, but everything was green.
They made it got like more green in the movies, I think.
Okay, yeah. I kind of dug it. It's kind of weird when the ship was flying at, like, you saw the close-up of her ring necklace, and then it faded. The next shot was the Romulan warbird. Is that a warbird? I guess it was. I don't know.
I don't know if it was a warbird or like a scout ship.
Yeah, I'm just calling it a warbird because that's the only Romulan ship name I can remember.
It's something that's reminiscent of a warbird. That's some kind of ship that fits into their ship design.
Right.
Scheme.
Yeah. You see. Yeah, you can totally tell it's a Romulan ship, and it's coming out of these. The shot blended the two rings of her necklace to these two.
Sort of astrological phenomenon.
Yeah, and I was thinking, like, what is that?
Astronomical, I should say.
I
hope it's not astrological.
Yeah,
astrological phenomena.
That would ruin the whole show.
Metachlorians.
I had no complaints about the Borg thing. I thought it was cool.
I didn't have any specific complaints.
Yeah.
I was curious though what that ring, that astronomical phenomenon was.
Unlike, I was like,
I didn't know what the fuck is that supposed to be anything. I don't know. It's just kind of like it fit the fade, but usually fades fade into something that exists, like a coin into a sun or something like that.
I think the implication is maybe it does exist or something. I don't know. It's a little, again, I think we can complain about it. We can accept it. Like with Discovery, I think we're just in the era of Star Trek where, to a certain degree, you're going to have to. And sometimes it's going to be style over substance.
Yeah, and
that can be good. It can be bad. I think it really depends how it's executed. And also, again, we'll have more context down the line. It could be, well, our plan is we're going to do episodes. We're going to go over each episode of Picard as they come out, and then we'll do like a nice little wrap-up episode at the end to see like what we think once we know the context and stuff. And that'll be fun. And our thoughts may change one way or the other about some of these things by the time we get there. But
yeah, I was really into the whole episode. I thought it was.
But with the Borg
cool.
Cube, what I was going to say is that the unlike those fight scenes and really most of the rest of the episode, it was a little more confusing, and maybe that was on purpose. But they were trying to convey how big this thing was, which I think they did.
Yeah, that was cool too. That shot at the end, zooming out,
zooming out and then up. I thought it was cool overall. But there were some points in there where the ships are flying in, and you're kind of like, I don't know where I am.
Yeah.
Like, oh, now I'm outside. Okay, yeah, it's a big ship. I you know, maybe they could have done with a little less of that labyrinthian type stuff, because it was kind of like, what's going on? Are there ships flying on the inside of the ship, or like what exactly is going on here?
Yeah, we'll see how that last part was confusing, but yeah, it's interesting, right? Romulans, Borg ships, synthetics destroying like Mars, like that's got to all be related, right?
Yeah, of course, that'll be interesting. And then
like our Borg's finding it's easier to assimilate robots because they can just press a button and all of a sudden all the robots are theirs.
Well,
as opposed to humans where you have to come in contact with each one.
We also have to consider it from another perspective, which is when you're dealing with, we have 3 key potential antagonists and potential allies. We don't know the deal yet, but they do have a characteristic. We have these synths, we have the Borg, and we have the Romulans. And the key thing among them is they are all in some form or another refugees. You know, they're all from cultures that have some like small remaining people of a culture that's considered bad somehow. The Borg, the Romulans, enemies, the synths, attacks. So there's that problem. So I'm expecting that will be a key thing. And maybe it'll be that those 3 factions are working together. Maybe it'll be that they are working at cross purposes, even though they all have kind of similar goals in the end or whatever. And they'll tease out some interesting literary stuff that way. We'll see. I hope so. Otherwise, you know, hopefully it's not just whiz bang, boom, boom, pow, pow. But my expectation with Patrick Stewart's involvement and what we've seen so far in this first episode is that we'll probably get something a little bit more meaty and interesting and philosophical.
Yeah, they set up some cool stuff, and I was pretty into it. Synthetics.
Say it again.
Synthetic sympathizers. I keep trying to say this and I keep fucking it up.
Synthetic synthesizers.
Synthetic sympathizers.
Sympathizers or synthesizers?
Sympathizers.
Synthesizers.
Picard is a synthetic sympathizer.
What about a sympathetic synthesizer?
What the fuck? A sympathizer. Wait, what'd you call him? A
sympathetic synthesizer?
Sympathetic synthesizer.
It's like a synthesizer that makes, you know, it understands that you've been going through a lot that day, which is why you keep fucking messing up the fat beats.
The fat beats.
Like you're trying to put in some fat beats, and the synthesizer's like, it's okay.
It's okay.
This beat does not groove, but that's okay. You've had a long day.
You are thick enough. It is fine.
Take a break. Have a drink. Come back.
Well, the synthetic sympathizers are the synthesizers, right?
What?
The synthetic sympathizers are the synthesizers.
Are you trying to make something happen?
The synthetic sympathizers are the synthesizers.
Just let it go.
Okay, I think we got to close up the episode there. But before we go, first of all, a list of episodes, and this list may grow. But a list of episodes that I think it is worth catching on Netflix or whatever you have access to.
That dog had beefy shoulders.
Yeah, it's this beefy dog. A Measure of a Man, which we already discussed, where Picard defends Data's rights, and it also is the introduction of Maddox. The Offspring with Data's daughter Lal. I, Borg, which is where we meet Hugh, who is a Borg, 3rd of 5. He was separated and became independent, and then there was a whole genocide debate there, which was really interesting. And that character is going to be on Picard. We already know that. Also, Descent Parts 1 and 2, which is where we actually see Hugh again, because he tried to start like his own little like Borg like independent collective community, and Lore came in. So I mean, clearly that's going to be that must be related too, because it involves Lore, Data, and Hugh. who we know certainly at least Data and Hugh are going to be important characters in this. Unification, parts 1 and 2, might not be directly related, but it does have Spock on Romulus. It does explain a lot of the Romulan politics of the time. I didn't have time to look through the Voyager episodes, but any Voyager episodes that are focused on 7 of 9 and her transition from being a Borg into being a human. One interesting thing about that whole storyline, it is one of the more interesting and valuable things in Voyager, is that when she starts out, she doesn't really want to become human, right? It's not like Data, who wanted to become human from Encounter at Farpoint. He's talking about how he wants to become human. Like with 7 of 9, it's a process where she slowly starts to regain her humanity over time, and even her desire to regain her humanity is not there at the beginning. In the Pale Moonlight, I just tossed that one out there because it's one of the best episodes of Star Trek ever. It's the Deep Space Nine episode where Sisko and Garrick team up to try to get the Romulans into the war. Yeah. But it does serve as some background as some of the previous history of what the Federation, the shadiness the Federation's willing to do, including characters we like and care about, in order to potentially fuck over the Romulans, because a lot of Romulans are going to die as a result of that. Balance of Terror and the Enterprise incident from the original series, which we mentioned before, particularly the Enterprise incident, because I do think that in addition to being a fun, cool little story, it's a nice episode of Star Trek. I really do think that that's what they've been going for on Picard in terms of the looks of the Romulans. They're really more in line with how they were dressed and carried themselves in that particular episode. So I think that's probably going to be very informative. And then finally, Nemesis.
Here we go.
Nemesis clearly has a huge, more so than a lot of these other things, it's a huge import. I think Nemesis, Measure of a Man, and Offspring are probably the key ones that would be useful to watch, to have some better background about this particular series.
Well, Nemesis, didn't the deal is that the Nemesis, they were going to make another movie, right? Or at least that was, I guess the intention was to keep making Star Trek movies.
I think they wanted to keep making, and sort of killed it.
Yeah, and it just kind of was like...
Sort of killed the Next Generation
Killed the motivation. Be like, well, we didn't have much of an idea anyways,
Yeah, and I know a lot of people quite enjoy Nemesis, and I have no criticisms for people who enjoy it, because it's, enjoy what you're going to enjoy. I think it's, from my perspective, it's just not a particularly entertaining film. It's almost more frustrating because there are little bits of plot and stuff there that are potentially very intriguing. It's similar to, like the Voyager Caretaker, where it's like kind of like there's stuff there that could have really worked, but they didn't always do it. And Nemesis is a much worse example in terms of, I really think they did some weird stuff in Nemesis.
And Nemesis also had uncharacteristic action moments. Not that action moments are in themselves uncharacteristic, but just the way they were presented in Nemesis. Like, I think the famous Picard in the Moonlander, whatever, the moon ship.
I know what you're talking about. Whatever that buggy.
The off-road moon buggy, whatever. The moon buggy.
But the parts of the episode that are relevant, the movie, probably worth seeing just in order to have like some better understanding.
Well, that's what actually one thing when Daj jumped that far distance, I was wondering, is that too much like Nemesis? No, it's not. But that did pop into my head. I was like, are they going to jump too far into these kind of weird action? But I saw it and I was like, I actually kind of dug it. So I don't know.
Yeah. I think overall, it's not going to destroy your life to watch this movie.
No,
it's not like it's that bad or anything.
No, it's not. It's
more disappointing than anything.
It's whatever.
And I, frankly, you could argue this is true of almost all the Next Generation movies, is that their decision from a production standpoint to shift to more action and to shift to more of a Picard Data focus. Those are great characters. We all love those characters, but it did leave a lot less for the other characters to do, and it did get away from what most people liked about the Next Generation, which was the sort of more like solving problems through negotiation, through clever science, through logic. That went a little bit out the window in favor of some whiz-bang stuff, which is not necessarily bad. I really think that Star Trek can do great stuff with action. It's more about what story are you trying to tell, and what part of the universe are you looking at? I don't mind that Discovery has a lot more action, because that's what it's trying to do. It's from the beginning, it's set up that way. And you don't have to like it, you don't have to watch it, but it's okay to have that there. What's more problematic is when you keep like shifting back and forth. And I think a lot of people were concerned that Picard was going to maintain that focus on the action and the and the woo-ha and the wee-wee and the da-da. And at least with the the first episode, it does seem like that is not where they're going to put the focus. And what action they did have propelled the plot forward. It had a point in being there, and it was well executed.
Yeah.
And if they can keep that
Wasn't
up,
drawn out.
I think that'll be. I think it bodes well for like a good season of Star Trek. We'll see at the end, but like so far so good. I think it's an interesting story.
You mentioned Measure of a Man. I remember that was...
It's not about measuring penises.
No.
I thought that at the time.
Right.
I didn't watch the episode for years because I was concerned.
I mean, I just wanted to point that out. Bring that up so he could point that out.
And I thought they might use like metric, and I don't know how long my penis is in metric.
And is it the base of the...
Where do you even get a metric
You begin
ruler?
it at the butthole. You start measuring from the butthole.
Yes, exactly.
And then and that's how you measure your penis.
Yes, that's the rules.
That's the rules. If you were wondering, I have them. I have the answers. So Measure of a Man, I remember Will Wheaton posted a link to that and was like, this kicks ass, or this is amazing, or this is perfect, or something like that on Google Plus, I remember.
Oh yeah, like old school Google Plus.
Yeah.
We all tried. We tried to make it work, Google.
Yeah. But it was the scene where Data it was from Measure of a Man, where like Data was talking to someone about like, he's talking about Geordi's eyes and like, why don't they, something about like, they keep trying to replace his eyes with people eyes. I don't know. It was comment. I remember at the time watching it, and whoever remembers this is going to be pissed that I'm being an asshole about it, but I remember it, and it was very meaningful, something to do with like, basically about prejudice and being exclusive. Yeah. And I got farther into this than I really intended to just now, but I was just well,
I think it is Measure of a Man where Picard, I could be wrong, but I believe it's Measure of a Man where Picard, maybe it's somewhere else. But at one point, Picard is talking with Data. My extra might be a different episode. And he's referring to Data as a culture of one, basically, and that there's still value there because Data was lamenting that, unlike the Vulcans and the Klingons and the Romulans and the humans that have sort of a shared culture that they can, helps construct their self-identity, that he lacks that. And Picard says, no, you're a culture of one, and that has value. You've created yourself the way you wanted to.
Yeah, this was different. This was, I believe Geordi was the comparison point about how Geordi's eyes are like aided by, synthetic sort of system, and comparing it to Data and like intentions and desires versus what you have, and like, is it better to be mechanical? Then why do people strive to get rid of their mechanical?
He's a mechanical man.
Because they don't, and the idea was like, they don't consider me a person, is what Data was basically saying, and it's fucked up.
Well, and last point is, of course, in Measure of a Man, one of the key things being discussed was they wanted to create essentially a slave army of androids. And it appears that may be what in fact happened, because they keep talking about these rogue synths, which implies that they were not doing something that they were supposed to do, right? Or that they were under control of somebody and they went rogue, right? So we'll learn more about that. I'm sure we'll learn more about the background of that soon, which will be cool. So anyway, I guess that wraps things up for this evening.
Wrap it up.
Yes. Put 2 on.
That's actually bad.
I know.
I was saying that I know they often make that joke.
Why would you put 2 on?
That's
because you're stupid.
Because they'll make it in movies and say, "Oh, he put 2 on just to be sure,"
Don't even put 1.
And it's just spreading misinformation. I didn't say you were. I'm sorry. I didn't mean anything by it.
Hey, kids out there, when you have sex, put 2 condoms on. It's double the protection.
Don't even put 1 on.
So, Dan, what do you think? Jesse and I are giving alternate advice. He's suggesting that you should only have sex with people bareback. That's the colloquial term. That is sans condom. I'm suggesting
just
that you
pull
put
out.
2,
Sans
3, maybe if you can put 10 condoms on, if you can squeeze them on, and you can still just
if there's anything left,
keep
after
putting them
that.
on. Okay, so next week we will be talking about episode 2 of Picard, which is titled Maps and Legends, which sounds super fucking cool. Maps and Legends. It's a very archaeological type thing.
Next week.
We'll talk about that next week. You can reach us on any form of social media at It's Got Star Trek. The @ symbol. You all kids know how to do that, right? The little swirly snail looking thing with It's Got Star Trek after that, whether it's Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. There's a subreddit, but it's got everything.
But when you're putting the URL inside your address bar in your browser, don't put the apostrophe in the it's, because it won't work.
Yes, and yeah, exactly. Don't put the fucking apostrophe in the it's. If you go to itsgotstartrek.com, then don't put the apostrophe, even though there should be an apostrophe. We had somebody comment on that, and they suggested that there's not supposed to be an apostrophe. And it was a very nice person, and I apologize to them ahead of time. But let's just get this out there in case there could be people who are not listening to this podcast purely because they are in the mistaken impression that grammatically the "It's Got Star Trek" should have no apostrophe, but it should because it has got
it
Star
makes
Trek.
no sense to have.
It's
no
not
apostrophe.
possessive. It's not. It's got Star Trek. If it said it's Star Trek, maybe it didn't have an. If the Star Trek belonged to this thing, but it doesn't. It has got it. We the podcast.
It's possessive makes no sense.
The
That's not a
audio
sentence.
podcast apostrophe. It has. It's got Star Trek.
They thought we were saying like it has got Star Trek.
Yeah, they thought we were saying it is got Star Trek.
Yeah.
It is not. It is got Star Trek.
That's dumb.
I mean, they didn't say that, but that's like as if it's like. What is that? Did you think we were saying it has got Star Trek? Why is that wrong? I was trying to figure out, like,
It was just mildly upsetting.
Yeah.
But hopefully we've cleared that up now.
Which is more wrong, Jesse? It's without the apostrophe, or if you were to say it has got Star Trek?
It has got Star Trek. It's fine because that is
has.
No, is. I'm saying if you were going to say it, if you were,
it is got doesn't make any sense.
No, that's what I'm saying. Which makes less sense? It has got Star Trek, or it's got Star Trek with no apostrophe, which makes less sense.
Both.
They're both
wrong.
They both make they make no sense.
Yeah. They make no sense. Anyway, you can email us at feedback@itsgotstartrek, no apostrophe, clearly. Normally there would be, as we've just discussed. So that's it. Any last words by you two of you guys? You twos?
I'm good.
You're good? Dan?
Interesting makeup thing that she had on the newscaster, that they put the makeup on the future makeup. I thought that was cool.
I saw that on the internet. You can get that now.
But it's just shotgun some makeup on your face like that Simpsons?
No, I think it just like does an overlay. So like you can't, not in real life, but like the overlay. Anyway. Okay.
Oh, it was just showing it on the news, not her.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll get Dan. So for Christmas, we're gonna get Dan a giant room and a virtual makeup set. So
I'd be so happy.
I'm all set for Christmas and birthday. So I'm all set. Sorry, Jesse. I got dibs on those. You can find something else for this motherfucker. So anyway, have a good night. We'll talk to you next week.
Star Trek.
Je sais que tu penses ramener ça à la maison. Mais c'est hors de question. Fais pas semblant de pas parler français, on s'est pratiqué.
Ah, the French